allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Any revisions to the agenda?
I was hoping to take a few things off.
Some clarification. The superintendent's comments is going to include a short presentation.
We have lots of superintendent's comments.
But I'll be quick, I promise. And where do we have it?
Under I? Oh,
No, the program of studies will, rather than a full presentation, they felt that they were going to, originally planned on it, but they have the documents ready and thought they'd make it available to the board, have any questions, and then look for the next meeting, come back with a more full presentation. I think there were still some conversations that needed to be had with staff. So this is sort of the penultimate version going in, but in case the board has some questions about some things, they thought they would try to get it to you sooner rather than later.
correct. Summary of non-public actions from the January 8th, 2014 non-public session. Mr. Miller made a motion to approve the non-public minutes of December 18th as written. Mr. York seconded, motion carried 5-0. Mr. Miller made a motion to accept the resignation of Deja Gatherum and release her from her contract effective February 28th, 2014. Mr. York amended the motion to accept the resignation of Deja Gatherum and release her from her contract effective February 21st, 2014. Mr. Miller seconded, motion carried 5-0. And with that, we have Mr. Reagan, presentation?
Presentation?
A presentation or?
No presentation.
No
So, I'm here.
That comes on the first.
Yeah. I'm your referee at the deliberative session on the 5th of February at 7 o'clock, and this is my assistant, Dan Regan.
Nice.
In case you know. And I'm here just to collect information about the warrants that you plan on presenting. Typically, I just get a copy of them, and we go through them just to help me identify who's going to speak to each one, and if you expect there to be issues.
Okay. We can make it a community process.
Yeah.
Collaboration.
Okay, fine.
A very wise man motioned that the chair should present the budget
Very wise.
right before he became chair.
That was not me.
So,
I'm good with that.
So, yeah, I'm just looking for a quick rundown, who's doing each one, and there aren't that many I see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Figured after Saturday, you wouldn't want a lengthy set of warrant articles.
Yeah.
So I guess, yeah, I'll do the first one. The second one is the contract. I actually had a question from the board about that. I would obviously present it. I'd welcome input from Dr. Cochran. The LEA has also asked if they could answer questions or help present information as part of it too, since, they're knowledgeable about it as the rest of us. So I wasn't sure if the board would be open to that.
Are we going to have a discussion on it right now?
We can have a discussion there if you want, but I'll just throw it up here. You can ponder it until we talk about them later.
I guess I would, just for people to ponder, I would not object if they spoke from the microphone on the floor, but
For being on the stage, might be.
I believe the microphone on the stage is reserved for board member, or budget committee members, speaking in that
As a board.
capacity.
As a board member, okay.
In that capacity, and you make that pretty clear from the get-go.
Sure.
That would just be my input, but we can have a discussion.
Article 3, I actually think that maybe you should do it too. Article 3, on the part-time computer teacher. You could probably support it better than I could.
Yeah.
Yeah. Article 4 is pretty straightforward.
No speakers for 4?
We can, yeah, it's straightforward. I could speak to it, or Frank could speak to it too.
Okay.
Article 5, John, would you want to speak to Article 5 since you were on the committee that,
Actually, I wasn't.
you weren't?
Trish was.
Trish was, okay.
We can. Trish was.
Okay. And you are pretty familiar with it too? Okay.
Either one.
So it's Patricia?
Yeah.
Well, it's a signer, she's not here.
And Frank is her backup.
Frank is her backup.
Derek, are you speaking to two?
What's that, the contract? Yeah.
Okay.
With backup from Dr. Cochran.
Okay, so number 1 is Derek, number 2 is Derek, number 3 is Dr. Brian Cochran, number 4 is Derek, and number 5 is Patricia or Frank. Sound right?
Yep.
Do we expect anything I should be aware of, any kind of uproar or revolt or?
Hopefully not.
No? Good, good.
I can't think of it. It's been pretty.
There's none scheduled, but they usually aren't.
No scheduled revolts. Michelle,
Flash Bob is not scheduled.
okay. You're gonna get me a copy when?
As soon as the budget committee the board votes on everything, we have all the complete votes,
Okay,
and they've signed it, which will be tonight.
Okay.
I'll get you the bigger copy.
She knows how we're voting.
Oh, no, 'cause-
just send me this copy and we'll make it fit into my,
I got you.
my assistant will help me fit that into my,
All right.
my package for the deliverable.
You can send it to my office, he can help me.
I know, I
Awesome.
know. Okay. You're getting fed, so be quiet. Okay, that's all I really have. I don't have any presentation to talk about. I'm here to help otherwise if you need my assistance, but this sounds like it's pretty good.
You running again? It's open today. School district moderator is.
I haven't thought not to run.
I guess if you run or not.
You want it? I'll.
No, I can't hold both positions, regrettably. You make it sound like I like to talk.
So, yeah, I hadn't thought about it, but I guess I will.
I just didn't want the week to slip by without someone at least
So I should
reminding
talk-
you that it was open.
Okay, so I should get
Terry.
with Terry and,
Carrie Breen.
all right, fine.
I already have you on the ballot anyway.
Second.
John, I think you would win the write-in vote even if you didn't run.
Yeah, okay. Good. Thank you.
Cool, thanks for coming.
Yep. And I do support wrestling, by the way.
We have a lacrosse donation from Litchfield Lacrosse Association. Are they here, or are you presenting?
Coach Patterson.
They asked if we would be allowed to accept their donation.
It looks like it's a helmet, a clipboard,
It's equipment, yeah.
so basic equipment, yeah.
Is this the outcome of the grant?
No, this is
It's separate?
Yes. The grant was a separate issue. We actually have started receiving some of those, some of that equipment, and storing it away.
In that vast storage space that you have.
Inner sanctum that nobody knows what goes on back there, you know.
There's room now that the firelight's gone.
What?
There's room now that the firelight's gone.
This was the donation that was on last month, but we're gonna take it off because we didn't have the list yet.
Oh, wow.
So that's basically from the Litchfield Lacrosse Association, I believe.
I'll make a motion to accept the lacrosse donation.
Second.
Any discussion? All's in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries 4-0-0.
I understand they've held a couple of camps that have been well-attended.
Yeah, they're trying to get it going. It's a bit of a roadblock in that the person that we were planning to offer the girls' job to had to withdraw. And so we have reopened that position, and we are
Interviewing?
trying to find the right candidate.
Enough said.
Excellent. And that brings up Mr. Douglas, Litchfield Wrestling.
I printed up some of my own PowerPoint. Can they be passed around, please? I'm not going to go through word for word. I'm just going to hit some of the high points.
I'll trade you, Michelle. I'll give you that back.
Wrestling's a pretty new sport for Litchfield, even though it's been around since Steve Callahan started a team here in 2007 with a youth program. Really got off the ground in the 2008-2009 season. I've included some numbers in here, but the high school team, which is who I represent, is in their 5th season. We're in the middle of it now. We have 25 wrestlers. There's about 70 kids in the wrestling program as a whole, including 45 or so in the youth program, and like I said, 25 here at the high school team. In the few years we've only been here, we've had some pretty good successes, had some, the popularity and the growth of the team is really what has struck us, and really where the team has really been fully integrated into the school with students and faculty attending the home meets, even some of the away meets. But where we fit in is we're the fundraising arm. We call ourselves Friends of Litchfield Wrestling. We do all the fundraising to fund the team, which runs about $10,500. I've listed the current board members on there, I think all of which are here. Let me see here. I mean, we strive for a lot of the similar goals as the school district with pushing academic success, sportsmanship, self-confidence, courage, discipline. The wrestling is open to all abilities, all kids, even some kids who are not necessarily wrestling inclined, kids who need to learn self-discipline. This is really giving them a confidence boost because all kids are accepted. It's not like a full tryout like a basketball or football team where kids are cut. It's accepting of all. And even when we have a pay-to-play fee, kids aren't left off based on their ability to pay that fee. We've over the years learned to work around that. But like I said, this is our 5th season. We've successfully funded ourselves for the first 4. Where did I leave off? Fully funded ourselves with, over the first 4, we've held golf, every year we have golf tournaments. We host youth tournaments here on behalf of, in the state of New Hampshire, whether it's middle school, states, or youth tournaments. I think we've become very good citizens within the school and the school district. I think the cafeteria staff and even the maintenance staff would say how we leave the school as good or not in better condition than when we arrived. But we've always been striving to be that good citizen, to be accepted by the school district and by the school. And we've seen the progress through the 5 years. We are coming to the point where our fundraising efforts have really becoming taxed. At the top of the 4th page there, I give you some numbers there over our seasons of what our fundraising has been doing over these 5 years. In 2009, 2010, you can see there, we raised over $13,000, and our numbers have significantly dwindled over these 5 years. This year, there's a tournament that we were supposed to be holding for the state of New Hampshire coming up in about 2 weeks that was taken away from us, which as a result, where it looks like we may fall short of our fundraising for this year, that we may not be able to fully support our season this year. Which has brought the question to us as to the long-term financial viability of this program based solely on fundraising. It's really becoming quite difficult. We have some theories as to that we think the pool of charitable giving is a finite pool that's just now being divided up into more and more pieces for more and more programs. Sports and is just one segment of it. I'm sure others. Clubs and drama groups and whatever are, feeling the same pinch. But where we're fundraising $10,000 a year, we're seeing it hard and fast. We're not out of there's one possibility that we may get another tournament from the state. We're yet to hear about that. Probably later this week we're supposed to hear. But the question still remains as to whether this team belongs to the school district. I think we've done a very good job of trying to integrate that into the school, get as many kids involved as possible in a positive manner with the school, with the athletics department. And I brought Coach Patterson with us just as a sort of to vouch for us as to where we stand in his eyes and within that department's eyes. But we came here looking to see if the SAU would take over and fully fund the Campbell High School wrestling program. The program, if that were to take place, I don't think the program would be, that our job would be done and we'd walk away. I think we're in need of a new mat. So I think the Friends of Litchfield Wrestling still has plans to be around, and I think fundraising could still help the program because it doesn't have everything it needs, but we've managed to get by with what we have. But I think we would still do some fundraising to keep up with the team, but the main parts of the main costs of the transportation, the coach's salary, and et cetera, are some of the big things that we're looking to see if we can get covered.
Are you talking about this year or next year?
Well, fingers crossed, I think we're going to be able to cover, hopefully we'll be able to cover this year. If we don't get a tournament, we're not going to be able to cover this year. I can't say definitively one way or the other which way it's going to happen. Even if we were to fall short this year, I think we'd be able to make up for that. Future years is really the main focus. I think we'd find a way to finish out this year. It's really the 14-15 school year, I guess, is really where we're talking about picking up.
Didn't we already look at once our current athletics and where we're spending the stipends and stuff for coaches and looking at ways to open up some of those spaces for wrestling?
We talked in general about, and several times, about, you know, what we perceive to be the quality and the value of the program, that they were, I mean, they've been asking for this status virtually since the school opened, actually before the school opened, and have been told back about the time the school opened, according to the minutes that I read, that they would be the next sport in consideration. They've offered a quality program at, they've fundraised, they've done it on the backs of volunteers, where other sports, for reasons that escape me, have not. I think there are different ways that we can address that. Athletics at Campbell is sometimes a lightning rod for interest within the community. I'm sure that's news to none of you.
You're kidding.
But I think that we have to, you know, if Mr. Patterson and I can get together and look at what some of the options might be, have some, you know, if I and Principal Rothhaus can get together and look at some options, and then see which of those the board might be interested in. We could schedule something at some point down the road.
I understand there's been a formula that's been kicked around, or the idea of a formula where in the athletics department, all teams would be covered up to a certain percentage, and whatever that other percentage remainder, everyone else, each individual team would be responsible to be fundraising. If that were one viable option, I mean, we'd be fully supportive. We've already got our fundraising arms and, armed and ready to go. So like I said, the programs here, we've built it from nothing to where we have state championship banners hanging now, and maybe more to come. So we really want the program to stay.
Well, and the other piece is that there's it's not just a high school program. I mean, from that foundation has come a real youth involvement.
Yep. Our youth team
which
started.
generally is needed in order to maintain traction, because unless you have that, your numbers will, vary over time. And it's easy to see the way the community has embraced the sport, and the values that the parents believe that it brings to the students that are involved.
Yeah, I made this presentation, I think it was 2 years ago, from what I found. And at that time, we had about 50 kids in the program, youth and high school. And now we're at 70 kids. I think it's 2 years later. So granted, the majority is in the youth program. There's more years involved, but I think we have something in the neighborhood. Liz McDonald could tell us, I think, someplace in the neighborhood of 25 to 30 kids in the K to 4 age. So it's not like it's all just jammed up in the 8th grade and older. It's, it goes all the way down to the kindergartners.
So, in my eyes, this is just a revenue discussion. The board decides on revenues and where they come from. And we deallocate $10,500 in revenue from self-funded and move it over to the regular line. When Mr. Douglas was here several years ago and there was the Warren article brought forward, that was my argument then, and it's still my argument, that the program is in the budget, it's been accepted, albeit as a self-funded program by the community. I think we asked them 5 years ago to sign a 3-year agreement that we would consider after 3 years.
That's exactly it.
I was disappointed in the direction the board went in 2012, because I believe it's just a revenue discussion, and revenues are strict purview of the board. They're not approved by budget committee. They're implicitly approved with the budget on voting day. And it's that simple of a question as to where do we get the revenue for wrestling. It either comes from fundraising or it comes from the general fund.
So we now move $10,500 out of a self-funded budget line into now a funded by the district line. Where's athletics coming up with $10,500? Because budget's already been set for next year.
It's gonna be more than that, John, because then you have to do the increase in the bus transportation. That's like 38% of their cost. It's probably another $1,500.
But they're fundraising the entire amount.
Yeah, but I'm saying, where is the athletic department going to find the money? Because they are funded based on what they have now, not anticipating this coming in. So how and where, we know there's not, because we just went through the nice, happy budget season. So where do we see the revenue coming from?
I think there are a couple of options, one of which is that we equalize that increase in athletic expenditure across all the sports, wrestling included. I mean, the athletic budget is the athletic budget, and if you think of wrestling within that sphere, right now, wrestling pays all of their expenses, other people pay none. Mr. Pascucci has talked about it. It would involve, a user fee structure, which, if you've been here before, know that I'm not in favor of. But if there were no other way to do it, I think in the name of fairness for the people associated with wrestling who've done everything that's been asked of them in order to become a full sport, and it's been more of a political football than it has a valued activity in some people's eyes. I think that would be an option that if all else failed, that the board should look at.
I think you would find our attorney would advise us against that.
I know.
Activity fee or the?
And I agree with him most of the time.
Well, it's funny because,
I'm not suggesting what the board should do. All I'm saying is,
Londonderry, Wyndham, Bedford, they've all instituted fees.
Just
I hear you, I'm with you, I read the same
happy
thing,
to
but they're all.
reshare his opinion with the remainder of the board that
No, we've had the
might not have
discussion
read
many
it.
times.
I just think,
I don't think it's so much about the individual fee. I think it's more about a share across all the teams. I mean, I know Pascucci he came to see us after that vote. We were in the transition of one board ending and our new members coming on, and he came to see us and met with us and came to us with that same idea. I don't have anything against it. I think it's nice to have a share. I don't think it's about saying it's $100 a head to play. I think it's more about a team having a percentage, whether they fundraise to cover that or they charge a pay-to-play fee. I don't think that's necessarily the school district or the athletic department's.
I'm not suggesting that's a preferred way to do it. I'm just saying if it's not doable any other way, then to me, I think the principle of supporting people who have done many times over what's been asked of them to do in order to be brought within the school program is.
I argued 2 years ago that they held up their end of the bargain and we should hold up our end, that it's a successful program. And I'm not charting success by state championships, but by participation and looking at the spread of participation and watching it grow over 3 years. I don't know that we'll be so lucky with ice hockey, but you never know what transpires year over year.
Well, this year, Campbell students outnumber Pembroke Academies.
I'm just saying, I don't know that it's viable that it continues in that fashion.
Coach Patterson, get something to say?
Again, to your point, they have, in good faith, upheld their portion of bargain. Every proposed budget that I've written has addressed funding of wrestling, and each one's been, denied.
Adjusted?
Adjusted, yes. Not to be argumentative, but all of our sports are not fully funded, okay? In that, football, Spirit, they do significant fundraisers to make their programs go. Okay? And I think virtually all of our sports do some fundraising, some more than others. Some sports are more costly than others. We could save some money by arguing some of our scheduling, like going to White Mountain to wrestle, for example. It might be something we need to look into. Is that really cost effective to go out there for a dual meet on a weeknight? Probably not, and we could argue that point when we get our schedule. Say our school board doesn't want us to take a trip this far for a dual meet. There are things that we could do to be more productive, but on some level, and preferably more than less, in my humble opinion, we need to step up and find a way to uphold our end of the bargain, because they certainly have upheld theirs.
Thank you.
That's why I say it's a simple matter of which column do we allocate the revenue from?
The problem is we can't change anything right now. It's already been sent off by the budget committee, right?
Yeah, we could-
Revenues don't, I mean, we can change revenues right up to the time we submit in September, if I remember correctly, what we expect our
will
revenues to be
change-
for the tax setting.
Yeah,
It's
we
in
will
the
change
budget.
revenues.
Yeah.
So it's just a
With
matter
tax
of where
set.
the revenue comes
Yeah,
from.
that's why I'm saying.
I think what Dr. Cochran has said here, and Mr. Miller as well, it's the program, how every program in the district's budget is funded is what we do. We kind of play with those numbers. Whether it's self-funded athletic program or district-funded program, it's within the school board's authority to make those changes. But the question is, if you're going to shift the burden from a self-funded to a district revenue, we need to be certain that we're not going to shortchange, if you will, the revenue flow. We need to take a look at that. So I think Dr. Cochran's initial recommendation is we can work through this and maybe bring something to the board. It's a fiscal year 15 issue that we bring. I am a little concerned to hear that there could be some shortfalls this year, and we can work through that as well.
I'm assuming we'll come forward with multiple options.
At least two.
At least two.
I know you guys have done a lot on your own. In your situation, I would suggest you might want to talk to the Booster Club if you haven't, to see if there's something you could do in concert with them that
The
would.
CHS Booster Club?
Yeah, and say, we need to make, we think we need to make $2,000 or whatever that right amount is. Is there something we can do as a joint thing? I know they've worked with the football team in the past to do things jointly, and I just encourage you to reach out to them
And we-
while
we-
you have time.
Yeah, and we've done that as well. Some of our off-season fundraisers, we've started to share with the lacrosse folks, working with them to try, we did a comedy night, and we did, shared the golf tournament to try to get more turnout, to get more, common interests together, and it worked out well, worked out fine. I mean, they're a great group to work with, but, 5 years is, like you said, the agreement was 3. We've trying to do our best to put our best foot forward, and we're asking to do the same. Thank you.
Yeah, it's obviously a very successful program. I know the youth program is extremely successful, and there's tons of community participation in it. And if you really have 25 kids for $10,000 is really a bargain when you look at sports, so it seems like something we should be figuring out a way to get into the budget.
I wouldn't, if there's going to be a proposal that shares the cost, it should be shared across co-curricular, my opinion. It's an athletic and co-curricular department, so I don't think, we deal with, they want to do an extra play, they just go off and do it and find a way. So I kind of view that somewhat analogous to bringing on another sport, so, or a music presentation, or whatever the
Yeah.
case might actually be.
They have a
so.
budget. How they spend the money within the budget is, not necessarily our problem.
So I want to personally thank you and everybody in the audience that's involved with wrestling, because you've taken something from, someone's idea and built it into a successful program. It's not every program that comes to the high school that you end up with the participation that you have. And I remember the first year, you read through the results, and it was, a forfeit, because they didn't have enough people for the
Our
weight
first year, we
class.
had 10 wrestlers. I actually I took out the picture, a team photo that I had that, my son wasn't even on the team yet. He was in 8th grade, but I have some of the stuff that's been handed down through the board. But it was 10 kids the first year. In these last 2 seasons, we've had 25 each year at the high school level. So it's, that's a basketball, that's a varsity and a JV team. Wrestling, it's not quite, but almost. So it's,
I read the Hollis Brook line, and it was like, Campbell person wins by forfeit. I'm like, wow, It took 5 years, but we got those to reverse where we were getting the forfeit win. And I'm sure that disappoints someone who's prepared to wrestle and doesn't get the chance to wrestle, but it's always
And
nice to get the
I
win.
know too, the high school kids that do participate pass it on to the younger kids too. You see them at the younger kids practices, you see them at the summer camps, and so it's.
The high school kids have used it as their sophomore project to work with the younger kids. I don't even know how many kids, 3 this year, but I mean, over the years, I would say that if it's 3 this year, I would say it's probably 12 or 14 kids I bet have gone through there and used that as a sophomore project topic, working with the kids and, I mean, putting in way more hours than they were required. You know, my son was one of them, so the hours add up, but it, you know, and that goes for the volunteers as well, who, you know, are very much in show here. But I think that's just another demonstration of where we stand in the community.
Well, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
We'll hopefully get back to you soon.
Please do.
Thank you very much. With that said, we have a wrestling match going on right now.
Program of studies, they're just handing it to us, or?
The original plan was to come and present the program of studies, and then, you know, let the board decide whether they wanted, you know, some things were straightforward, they wanted to take some action on tonight, or whether they wanted to, you know, have them come back and answer some questions. And I think the time is always shorter than you think, and I think administration felt that there were still some conversations to have with teachers and especially in some departments. And so, as of this afternoon, it was changed to request to give what is probably, I would say, Michelle, the penultimate version, not the final, but the version before the very final thing, so you can get some idea of, you know, what changes are
So
proposed.
page 1, line 3. The new Campbell High School mission statement replaces the old one. Okay, so what's the new mission statement? And when did we review it?
There was a whole committee that came back with a mission statement that we approved back last spring, summer?
Yes, Trish was on the PERC committee.
Trish was on the committee then.
And we spent significant time debating, and I think in the end, all that we changed was, there was 3 things.
Was it?
If you go into the full version, learning expectations, academic, social, and civic, and we talked about whether or not those were in priority order, and we spent a fair amount of time. I think in the end, the only actions the board took was to shuffle 1, 2, and 3 around a little bit, and other than that, pretty much accepted it as it was approved by the PERC committee.
I remember talking about the word diversity for like a good.
I think we took it out.
It's still there now.
Well, it's,
Number 2 under social. I remember talking about it. I don't remember what we said. I think at the end of it, we couldn't think of a better word.
Although I think
we left it there.
in this draft, core values should actually say mission, because what's underneath it is the mission, not the core values.
yeah. Yeah, that's true, it's under social. And we want the diversity to be respected, unlike what happened in New York State this week.
Yes, the governor put his foot right in his mouth.
I don't think I heard about that. I'll look it up.
And what is, can we just quickly go through just the changes that they gave us in case we have some questions? Just to clarify. What is the freshman e-folio?
It was an option to meet the technology high school requirement
Okay.
that hasn't been used in some time.
Okay.
The World Studies and American Studies, remember, this is a year that we were flipping topics. So we had a double year this year of one or the other. And so we moved, I think it was freshman and sophomore, or freshman and junior topics. So we had a double year this year, and so that was the first year in the change of the sequence to better align to the state requirements, and this would be the second year.
Did you guys have something else?
Could we take 1 more minute of your time?
Can you wait 5 minutes for community input?
Yeah,
Okay, cool. Thanks.
One of the humanities section, number 7 is just changing the requirement to participate, or junior to participate in the state assessment program, and that's required by an RSA.
I'm not asking you to go line by line, I'm just asking if you could just let the board prove this real quick and see if they have any specific questions. I take it that's what you're, maybe, most of the stuff I understand what it means, what you're doing, and I can go back and correlate it to the thing. I'm not looking for you to do a line by line presentation.
One of the things that is in here that I think the board will be interested in is conversation about how the honors option will be held. I know the board has been expressed concern sometimes that the honors option was more of the same as opposed to higher. And the language that's in there now basically says that a student will write a proposal. And then what happens is that administratively, the approval of that proposal often doesn't make it to the director of guidance until very late, and you're running around trying to find out who's actually in an honors class, do you have the right GPAs. So there's both an administrative side and a program side in terms of is the system working as it is? Would it be more beneficial to have the teacher define what the honors option is and specify the same things for everybody? And so that's one of the conversations that I think is going to take a little bit longer than they thought of. So that's coming. And I reminded administration that the board will likely want to hear how the school is addressing the issue of increase in the quality of the thought and higher expectations there, as opposed to doing just a broader range of work.
So, I see it under math, I'm looking under math, it looks like they're reshuffling some of the requirements to like a B+ for honors types classes.
I can go through the math ones if you like, one by one. The first.
Well, my question is honors strikes me as something that you would need an A to be part of. And my question is, why would we accept a B student into honors classes? Because that's not there's many reasons why someone may get a B, but the idea behind honors is that you've done the extra work that made sure that you didn't get a B, that you got the A at the end. And I take it it's not a B+ for semester, it's what your end of the year grade is. So if you stumbled a little bit, then you had another semester or some quarters or whatever to improve said grade. But it just seems to me that honors should be something that we're trying to apply to our best students, and that if we lower the requirement to get into those classes, is that really setting the bar high enough to where we want it, especially in math?
So, let me argue the counterpoint. Student gets an 89.8, which is a B+, because it doesn't round up.
Right.
Is the 0.2 over the span of a year enough of a discriminator to say you don't get in?
Let's say the devil's advocate, 0.2 is because he turned in half his homework late. Because that's, I can speak from experience.
No,
I know somebody that likes to do that all the time, from experience.
I would say that homework is not a summative and wouldn't count toward their grade. And I can say that because my distinguished colleague is not sitting next to me.
Trish, where are you?
I guess I'd argue your point too. I mean, we want as many kids as possible going into these rigorous classes, and
I guess I would hope that if there was 38 kids that wanted to get in, they'd take the top 30 performers if that was the class size. You wouldn't have somebody that was an A student not get in, schedule permitting, and have a B+ student get in.
Well, I guess I could understand that if there was, okay, in our honors classes, it's 22 kids is the max we're going to take in an honors class.
Whatever the number is.
I mean, whatever that number, because it has, my goodness, we had a month-long debate over .00042. Okay, and I don't want to have a month debate over B+ and A and whatever, but at the same time, you know, I don't want to increase the rigor and call something honors, and that it's not something that people have to try and be conscious of the due diligence that is necessary to be in those classes. And it shouldn't be, I mean, we don't want to have, I mean, at the end result, yes, we want everybody in honors class, but in reality, is that going to occur? And are we just going to make room for everybody that just wants to be in it, so we can say, well, we have more kids in honors than not, which waters down the achievement of those achievers?
So I don't know that more people in the class waters down the achievement. If we start grading down such that we're meeting some kind of predetermined or expected
Number.
curve, you know, whether it's a bell curve situated on a B plus or a bell curve on a C, then I agree. But I think we should let kids challenge themselves, and they'll rapidly know whether that B plus in the prerequisite is
Enough to get
enough
you in.
to get in. And then I suspect there will be, there's some movement every year. If guidance was here, I think we could say, are there people that move out of honors courses down? And I think you might find there's some people that try it. I'd rather have them try and recognize that they're not there and move down if they can.
Here's the other thing. And research shows that the frontal lobe, which is the area of prioritizing and decision-making and values, doesn't really mature, and there's some gender differences.
So about 52.
Well, I was going to say, the suggestion now is at about 23, which may actually be 28 and 18, given the gender difference. I would never have been allowed to have taken a single honors class in high school if that policy were applied, because I was bored and I was lazy, and I did not see the role of the stuff that I was taking in early high school towards my future. And it wasn't until I got into difficult classes that I went, well, it's kind of interesting, you know? Because the other stuff I could do in 10 minutes of class. If by high expectations we mean this is what it takes to get an A in this honors class, then letting somebody in, I'm with Mr. Miller, doesn't mean we're watering anything down. And people need to be aware of that in terms of, okay, you're in this honors class, this is your chance, and you need to see if you're up for this. And when this came up before, I know Mr. Lave and I disagreed. I argued the argument Mr. Miller argued, and she argued that, well, if they don't do the work last year, they don't get the chance to do the work this year. And my argument was, so I blow off this course, or my parents are in the midst of an ugly divorce, or my grandfather's sick and I basket case the last 3 weeks of the course and I end up with a B instead of, you know, the grade that I should have, I'm no longer eligible to take honors classes. I think as long as we maintain the high expectations and not teach down to students who potentially shouldn't be there, that kids will be well served. And
Well, I mean,
they'll
that's the
decide
other,
to-
that's the other thing. I mean, if you get students who aren't at the level of the honors class, you know, when you get into honors, there's an expectation that you know X. And, you know, if you're a couple notches below whatever X is, and you get into an honors class, the last thing that an honors class that I remember, the few that I were allowed to walk by the door, was that you know, they're not waiting for you to understand. Their expectation is you're going to understand. And as long as the rigor is such that the teachers realize that that's the expectation. I mean, if somebody's in your class and they're not there, and I've been in a couple math classes where that was the case for myself, and I either found a way to get myself caught up so that I understood what was going on, or in some cases, in college, I ended up dropping the class because they were talking a language that I didn't even see. That's when I realized, I was never going to be a mathematician or an engineer. But
Yeah, but to your point, John, when you're just saying like you had to get caught up, I think someone with B+ going into a high honors class can catch up. If they're off just by a little bit, that they have the ability to catch up.
And give them the opportunity, like, they may do the same thing as you. They may move from an honors course to a regular course because they're not successful. And then, hopefully, they've either learned the lesson that it's not for them because they're not strong in that subject, whether it's math, science, whatever it might be, or that I really didn't work hard enough, and
I guess the question, the gist of my question is, we're pushing very aggressively as a school board to improve the rigor on the students through the teachers. And and I'm willing to trust the knowledge of the principals and yourself and the guidance but at the same time, I don't want us to be saying B+ because I want people to feel good and have a chance. I mean, if their argument is that, there's enough students that are B+ that are probably, for whatever the reason, ready to take these honors classes and we wanted them to have that opportunity, then then this is correct. But if it's, well, we want to feel good about the people who are in B+ so that they have a chance, then I'm not so good with that.
If we're doing competency-based grading the way we should, we'll have the same conversation that I had with my math students back in the early 90s. The kid who struggles in math came to me and said, Mr. C, most I ever get for you is a 70, right? Can I do, extra credit? I said, well, what do you mean by extra credit? Well, I can do a whole bunch more of these problems tonight. And I said, okay, if you look at the stuff that's for these points and these points and these points and these points, you're getting 70, you're getting 100% of the first 70. And then you're really, the higher order stuff, you're just, is a real struggle for you mathematically. You're working hard, you're paying attention in class, you're doing your homework, but you were not able to demonstrate application. And what the request was, I want to do more of this stuff that I already know how to do and hand it in and get a higher grade. And I said, but you've already got the points for that work. I'm willing to put in whatever time it takes to help you do that work. And if we do it with that attitude, it's the very best combination of setting high expectations, being very transparent about what the expectations are, and helping kids that are willing to put in the work to meet them. And I think by and large we do it that relatively well.
Well, I mean, this is
But
the opportunity
your concern
here.
is well noted. If what we're doing is just saying anybody goes into an honors class and we make sure they get a passing grade.
And we're just as long as we're not just making the pool larger, we want to have these honor classes, we want to have X amount of students in them, and the numbers say we need to have 75 kids to be available to get the 20 kids that are necessary. And the only way to do that is to make the number a B+. Then I think that's an incorrect way of getting to a B+.
I don't believe that's what's happening.
I don't know if it is, but that's a good logical way of getting to a number.
I agree. My fear is what I expressed when we reviewed the curriculum is right now, between the honors and the non-honors course, it's a lot of what Dr. Cochran just said. They're apparently going to do more of the same work, because there's only 3 things that are different in a course. That doesn't necessarily make it for me. There should be more of a challenge. There should be higher order in terms of math or differentiation in terms of science offerings. That's what you want for that honors course, and then even more so for the AP. And that's where I'm concerned that I think a B+ is going to come in and do fine because they're going to do more of the work they got a B+ on. They're not going to be doing the higher order stuff, according to the curriculum that I looked at, that we tentatively approved for the high school.
And while we do grade distribution reports and F lists and things like that, I know that when I have conversations with administration, that it should be with an air to, okay, who's not doing well? Why are they not doing well? As opposed to, well, your F list is a little long this year. Well, okay, maybe some kids who shouldn't be in the class aren't in the class. And I've been pretty clear that if people aren't doing the work or aren't capable of being successful in the course that they're at, and that's why they get an F, that's okay.
So Go ahead.
I remember probably 5 years ago, maybe 6, we took failing from a 60 to a 65. And we looked at the number of kids that failed out of all 4 grades for the last 2 or 3 years when it was 60. And then we looked after the end of the 65 and it went down. Where you would argue the number of people failing probably should have went up. If you're going to have some number that are a D at a 62 or a 63 or whatever that number was. But because we raised that bar a little, we encouraged the people that were down there to not fall into that. To just be, okay, I'm going to do the same work and I'm going to fail. I think we can apply the same thing. We'll let that B+ person go up and try to be successful at that next level. And maybe they get a B+ in honors, and to me, that's
Well,
okay.
I mean, the biggest thing, you know, this is an opportunity for the math department in Campbell High School to fix between their curriculum that they're trying to get us to approve and this, that steady number of 40. Whether it turns into smarter balance or kneecap or whatever. This is their opportunity to put in place a plan that we probably won't be sitting here on the board. You'll be sitting with a new group of individuals, but whoever. But the next group of kids coming through the middle school, when they become juniors, the 7th and 8th graders, the freshman class from this year, because we did an all full year of algebra and stuff. That's the class that when they get to be juniors and they have to take the math, that we need to see a stark change in the math in our freshman class from this year.
And let me tell you some of the conversations around Math A. So delete pre-algebra and add pre-algebra daily. Last year we had both pre-algebra and algebra 1, and then we created algebra 1 daily. And I distinctly remember sitting here and high school administration, including principal, assistant principal, and math curriculum facilitator, said, you'll have to do it within the same resources. Can you do that? And the nods were very vigorous. When it came time to schedule, what we ended up doing because of the numbers of students who were in math classes was we didn't schedule anybody in a pre-algebra. We took the kids who had requested pre-algebra and we put them in, and the thinking was I think, very well intentioned. And that is, well, if they're in pre-algebra, they only get math every second day. And if we put them in algebra 1 daily, they get math every second day. That would clearly be more remediation than pre-algebra. But the reality is, I think we have 2 distinct populations. People who need support and more time to do well in algebra 1 to move on to be successful in geometry, and we have people who really weren't successful in middle school math and may not have been successful in elementary school math, who are going to need a year of math every day in order to take algebra 1 daily. Now the question then becomes, if we do that, do we need geometry daily? Because geometry daily was put in place because we had kids leaving algebra 1 not prepared for geometry. So they're actually being very thoughtful about this and saying, where we put the resources, here's the change that we should see in the results. If we're going to invest in everyday pre-algebra and everyday algebra, then boy, our geometry results had better be better, because the assumption is we're spending that extra resource in order to produce better math people, by the time they hit their junior year. And the nature of the conversations that I've been privy to has really been about that, and about the looking for, when we make this change, where will we see a measurable difference? And as I say, F-lists aren't always a great measure because it's a very corruptible measure. But I think the intent here really is to focus on giving kids the time and the support to do math well, rather than give them a set amount of time and say, well, we're pretty much going to move you on because it's a little embarrassing to have you, a 19-year-old. And I did teach a 19-year-old in grade 9 the first year I taught, by the way. And in Nova Scotia, 19 was the legal drinking age. And that's how I found out he was 19.
He wasn't bringing it to class, was he?
They have an open bottle policy up there in the
Basketball
A
game
countries.
stopped for a beverage on the way home, and he was there. One of my
Well,
grade 9 students.
I'm reading through this and I understand a lot of what they're doing in the sense, but, you know, math for our district is such a, you know, and again, and I look back and, you know, 20 or 30 years ago, the district tackled reading on a very heavy scale and solved that problem, and continues today to do it. And I think that's the battle that we're facing right now is math. And I think we're setting a great foundation in the middle school, and next year, you know, the transformation in the middle school will occur because, you know, the 5th graders and 6th graders should be where they're supposed to be. The 7th graders are going to double up and get their double education, and hopefully in 8th grade they'll be into the pre-algebra, algebra 1 and the stuff like that, so that as they're moving into the high school, you know, the transformation of the needing the pre-algebra should go away, and then we'll have, you know, and I'm okay with algebra daily and geometry daily if that's what it takes to make the 80% of the student body, or in this case, the 60% of the student body that's struggling with math, be able to successfully apply math on an assessment, then that'll be successful because they'll be able to apply it in the future.
And that really is, based on the conversations that I've seen, what the conversations are about. It's about shifting the mentality of, you know, these kids more or less move as a group. We've been doing this for probably about a century now, taking massive numbers of kids in and expecting them all to progress relatively almost at identical times, regardless of the developmental rate, regardless of their ability. And we're just now starting to figure out that it doesn't work. Who's the slow learners here? So the competency-based movement is intended to address that by making time variable and not budging on the level that students have to achieve. And I think there's some good conversations going on at the school. It's always been competency-based, but the notion of what do we mean by rigor? The word is thrown around a lot, and I think sometimes teachers are concerned that not everybody agrees what that means. And I think a lot of the right conversations are occurring. I think people are starting to look at the right metrics, and I'm very pleased. It does concern me that the K-8 curriculum guide was detailed, made sense, and the high school one did not follow that same clear-cut pattern of observable progression. And I think that is an issue that we have to address. But I think the conversations around the program of studies are the right conversations, and I think we're engaging the right people in the conversations about how we get kids better. And as much as we love our arts and we love our athletics, and we have, I think, based on the improvement in our reading results and our writing results and the feedback from the student surveys, which I thought was very helpful, talking about how much the humanities has helped improve writing. You know, the focus really has been on math and will continue to be on math. But, you know, it is going to take time. But like I say, the right conversations are happening, and I think we're looking at the right metrics. And, you know, we have some more work to do. But I'm actually quite pleased with the nature of the conversations that we had when Dr. Heon and myself sat down with the administrative team and talked about what not just what changes were being made, but why the changes were being made, what the rationale was, how this fitted into the bigger picture. It was a very encouraging conversation, and one that I was very pleased with.
And I'm guessing that the B-plus students in geometry are probably not our problem students on the assessment, for the most part.
So the next STEM subject, information and communication. I see computer programming, advanced website design, and advanced computer programming, all have notes, possible running start course for 2014-15. I actually just happened to, we just hired an intern at my company who happens to be a Campbell graduate. So during the interview, the first thing I asked him was, what did you think about, your courses at Campbell as far as, preparing you and stuff like that? And he said, unfortunately, none of those courses ran when he was there. So we need to find a way to get these more
So what were you
advanced.
looking at, Derek? I'm sorry?
Under number 11, information communication.
Oh,
All of those basically say possible running start. So from what it sounds like from talking to the student, when the whole time he was here, none of these more advanced computer programming classes ran, so we never got an opportunity to take them.
so
We have trouble with running the advanced courses every year. I think we
Is that
ran one
because
of the
of-
2 advanced courses with like.
one year there was an instructor issue, I think. There were so many kids in the basic that there was no time available for the advanced. And then you also struggle with, do you want a class of 4 or 5?
10 kids, yeah.
I mean, I don't even know that it got to 10. I think 10 is probably reasonable to run an advanced course, but
Yeah.
I don't think we were necessarily getting to 10.
If you're only getting 4 or 5, though, maybe we can do something like the 2 students that took the calculus BC. Maybe we can run some sort of.
Well, they're doing it
ELO.
in concert with an ongoing calculus class, I think.
Yeah.
One of the options that high school admin and Dr. Young and I have talked about has been, how do we address those courses that we've got 2, 3, 4, 5 kids who'd like to do it, and we just can't expend a fifth, 20% of a teacher's salary on.
Yeah.
I hate to be that blunt, but that's the way it is.
I mean,
That's what it is.
and what aren't you teaching?
Yeah.
Are you giving up,
So the question becomes, we have an ELO policy, and one of the things that we did in Nashville that I think worked relatively well was we were on a system of, well, teachers do ELOs and they just do it for the love of the subject and love of the students, and that works, but only to a certain extent. If you think of what's happening with the Calculus BC right now, you've got 2 students who are really being required to be very independent as learners, which is something that we want to really push. They're having high standards, and we're paying a stipend to the teacher to teach it. And so I do have a draft policy that looks at our ELOs and says, okay, we'll pay teachers $200 in ELO, but if you have 3 or 4 students, then you would get for maybe 200 for the first student, 200 for the second student, and then 100 after that, because you're duplicating your work now. And it allows us to offer those courses in a way where it's, well, we run one class of 6. It's the same as running no 6s, but taking the money that we would spend and doing 20 ELOs. It's actually more cost effective. The concern on the LEA side will be, we don't want to turn everything into ELOs, so we're going to want a cap on the size of an ELO group. And I think the teachers have been very supportive of that. We've had competency recovery pieces, but we need to formalize that piece so we don't come across as being arbitrary. But we pay stipends for something like, teachers who did competency recovery last year, stipends for Ms. Angelini for teaching the calculus BC class. And it's reasonable to do that. And I think we just have to see the class sizes, how this fits into our structure. And for me, I know when I was in Nashua, the math was really simple. The average class time divided by the teacher's average salary was about $500 a credit. And you're looking at a teacher and you're saying you're teaching a total of X people, divide by the average teacher's salary. If we can generate credits in those small groups at closer to $200 a credit, then kids are best served, and teachers can work with those kids who are highly motivated and do some of the other stuff. So that's something that we've had conversations about, and I think we'd like to bring forward to the board as a policy in time for next year. And that might be a way to offer those advanced pieces, even with groups of 5 and 6, because instead of costing 20% of a teacher's salary, or 10% if it's a half-credit course, it would be, $500.
I guess, can you double them up too? If a computer program is running with 15 kids in it, and you have 4 kids that want to take advanced computer programming, can they still sit in the same course but have different,
yeah, potentially.
curriculum?
So, do you want us to submit questions or comments in writing?
If
You want
wanna
us to email them?
If you just want to email Jody Callanan or me, and probably best to send them to
Just send
Jody, because she's the one who's the owner of the document, more or less,
Okay.
and we'll meet with them over time.
So, I actually started going through it, and the one thing that struck me, I know we've had some conversations about bringing back the Diploma of Distinction with 28 credits, which is not in here, which means we go another year without doing that. I personally would encourage them
Figure it out.
to figure it out and get it in while we've got this. I realize they probably had 12 other things on their mind that they wanted to get changed in here with all the courses, but it's
Well-
stuff like that I'd like to at least put it in and have the conversation. If they say, we're not comfortable doing it, then that's okay.
No, I
We've
think
at
they
least-
are interested, they're in a time crunch. And the other thing is, when you put it in, you're not gonna put it in for next year's seniors, you're gonna put it in for next year's freshmen or sophomores. So even if that gives you 2 years to tweak it, really.
Yeah.
Before you get down to nuts and
It
bolts.
needs to be,
So-
it needs to be.
I think it's still very doable within the time frame.
Yeah, it needs to be something that, I mean, and I take it, we're, what's the crunch on this? Because we're not going to have a chance to meet and discuss this again until the 19th. And I won't be here on the 19th.
Well, one of the options would be to meet at, 6:15 before the night of the deliberative, meet for half an hour with, this is the only agenda item.
I was actually just gonna ask too if we could move the 19th to February 12th. 'Cause I think all three of us probably wanna go to the Winter Carnival at GMS.
I'm away the 12th.
You're the Winter 12th?
I'm away on the 19th, I'll be in Nashville.
I'll be in Nashville on the 12th.
Yes. Give me a mint.
I don't know that it's a half-hour conversation.
I don't believe so.
Last time it was,
I mean, we could schedule it
Hour.
for after our delivery. You just gotta make sure you get delivered done in an hour there.
I'll be more than happy to get done in an hour. The hearing took like 10 minutes, right?
I don't
till we
see-
got to the town.
Oh, really?
The town, we were there for
Town's
45
gonna,
minutes.
town's got 21 times 10 minutes right there on their warrant articles, so they could be there for
February 19th?
all day
Make it-
Saturday.
Make it, expect that it will be a very significant part of the budget, of the meeting, rather?
Well, he's not gonna, John's
I'm
not
not
gonna be.
gonna be here, and that would leave you 3, because we don't know Trish making the decision. I mean, I don't have a problem with that. I mean, I'll send you my feedback.
Well, the other option would be to, if you had some time, to sit down with Julie and the admin team. And
I
give
could
them-
make
and
time to
give them-
come
Give
in
them your
and just-
feedback.
And just sit with
And-
them and ask questions and tell them.
Any
what
later
I-
than the 19th, and we really start getting into,
Yeah, they're meeting on the 4th with the 8th graders. And They
Yeah.
wanna,
March 4th.
they wanna be able to hand them the book and
Yeah.
say, make your picks.
Well, I mean, I know they gotta print it, but the 19th
Now here-
is plenty of time to get it printed.
here's the other thing.
That's what I'm saying. If we did it on 19th, I think it's fine. If you wanna, the next week, you're gonna meet at the 26th, which is gonna be
Which is
vacation week.
Vacation week.
It's always advantageous if you have the section counts determined before the non-renewal date.
Well said.
When's that? March 15th, right?
No, it's April 15th, I think.
April
Or
15th.
April 15th, yeah.
The long 5 minutes.
I'm
Really?
not a proponent of
2
huge,
minutes.
of huge changes to teachers, but there's sometimes where you have some transition and you're able to take advantage of an opportunity.
Yeah.
Well, let's, my recommendation would be, let's play it by ear. If our meeting goes long, I don't want to probably come in and have a lengthy meeting after that to discuss this. And I'll try to go through and review it and try to have some time with Julie and call her, see if she can schedule some time one afternoon. I'll come by and meet with them and give any feedback on it.
And
But
I think there'll probably be some T crossing and I dotting that will need to be done by various people prior to deliberative session starting at 7.
Yeah. I'd prefer
so
not
who
to
do
meet
we
for-
have that's a great I and T crosser? I dotter and T crosser that can run through the, their program of studies to make sure that it's, the flow of the wording is there.
Well, Dr. Heon's actually quite good at that.
Okay.
We actually did that this morning for 2.5 hours.
Okay, so you guys are, you're,
Nice.
you're,
We already-
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so, yeah, if you won't be here the 19th.
Because remember how we are when we trade your policy?
I know.
So if you won't be here the 19th, you're gonna go through it beforehand and meet?
Yeah,
with
I'm gonna,
Dr.
I'll give feedback to the
Go
school
ahead.
on my side, and
Excellent. Okay.
if there's anything real major that I'm concerned about, I'll send you an email on it. But I think, again, most of it is just personal opinion to make sure that they're being more rigorous and that we're really moving that process, so.
Okay. All right, with that, we enter community input. Sorry about that. I thought it was going to be 5 minutes.
It's okay.
I should have known better.
Back to the wrestling topic, if you wouldn't mind. We had some questions as to where we go from here. We were thinking of the different paths we could go. Would the board support the idea of going in at the deliberative session to request changing the dollar amount in the contract, in the warrant article, to add $10,500 to that, to incorporate?
The problem, I think, is, well, I guess if we increase the athletics budget by 10,500, the money's there, but it's a revenue issue, I think.
It's the same problem we had in 2012. Money is in the budget. All we're doing is, where's the funding coming from? Is the funding coming from the taxpayers or from your fundraising efforts? And the school board can make that decision. We don't need the voters to help us with that decision.
So correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm sure Frank will. The number that's on the warrant article is everything.
Correct.
How we spend it, correct me if I'm wrong,
Keep going.
It's
I'll
up to
stop you
us.
when you get going.
it's up to the board,
Right.
how we allocate the money.
So they're really, I mean,
So
the
when the budget passes, or the default budget gets put in, if the
or
operating
the
budget
other.
fails, I think, Frank hasn't stopped me yet, $10,500 becomes revenue from the district, not fundraised, and $10,500 moves from self-funded to the operating budget, and the bottom number is the same, doesn't matter. So I don't
Just
know
a
that
revenue,
it's
a revenue
finding,
falls short is all that really happens in that case.
no, because the tax rate doesn't get set until September. We can change revenues up to the point we file whatever the form is,
Whatever the form is.
for whatever the 22,
22.
so instead
with
of,
the state.
and let's say the budget is $20 million. Okay? And self-funding, so they need to raise $19,990,000.
The problem is-
So now they need to raise the full 20 million because
The problem
we've said
is-
this.
The problem is, the budget committee made their budget
Want to
based
go
upon
right to
revenue
the real
expectations.
issue here, it's about funding.
Yeah.
Because in September, we will need to lower, you're gonna be out of balance. Your self-funded appropriation will not be equal to your self-funding revenue.
Yeah.
Consequently, if the board moves to change wrestling from a self-funded to a athletic co-curricular program funded by, we will need to lower the anticipated revenue in September.
Yeah.
And that's gonna drop to the local tax appropriation. So it becomes
The tax rate would raise,
Yeah.
not for
Revenue
$10,000,
issue.
but it would technically raise.
But it's going to the board can do anything it wants, so long as it doesn't exceed the
Change
bottom
by
line.
about
It's gonna, it will change. The bottom line effect is that if it's 10,000 or 100,000, if we have a revenue shortfall in our projected, it's gonna drop to the local tax appropriation.
Go back a tenth of a penny.
The program is in the budget, whether you call it
Yeah.
self-funded, or you call
It's
it
why
athletics,
it's
or
a
you
revenue
call it,
question.
it's there. The appropriation is there for fiscal year 15, it's a revenue issue.
So when we look at the form, you'll see self-funded being whatever, 69,000 instead of 79,000, and there'll be
Yeah.
$10,000 more in the local taxation
Right.
number.
Or will physically change the appropriation somehow.
You could raise the federal budget by 10,500 and then just not spend the unfunded.
Well, yeah. Ultimately, it comes down to the end of 14, 15. We can't spend more than the voters have appropriated, but how it gets spent is completely up to us. That's why food service, if we overspend food service by $50,000, we have to underspend something else by $50,000, even if we
in the
have
general
revenue.
fund, because you gotta bring it over.
Because
Right.
it's the bottom line number.
Yeah.
And, Laurie Gandia, and the question that I had was, when you change that allocation, going from self-funded to now funded, you have to take those funds from someplace else. And when you do that, is that going to be done by a vote of the school board to change that? Is that how that would be
There's
done?
two ways we could do it. We could take it from something else, which it would be, actually, no, the administration would handle that. We don't handle, the athletic director could do that today if he wanted to. I mean, that's his budget. The problem is if we move it actually from self-funded to funded, now we're down, our revenues are down $10,500 is the problem, because we're not taking that money in.
And would that be by a vote of the school board to do that?
Yeah.
So the wrestling would only be successful if a majority of the school board wanted to make that change in allocation.
But now, since our revenue's short, unless we got revenue from another source, like say our school aid went up and made up for it, or we raised the tax rate, we'd have to reduce something else. We still have to balance the budget somehow.
So I think the concern that Friends of Litchfield Wrestling has is if there's not a successful vote to change that allocation, another avenue that it could pursue would be at the deliberative session, make a motion to amend the bottom line dollar to increase it by $10,500 to fund the wrestling. And if we did that, if that was done by Friends of Litchfield Wrestling, if that was done, then when it went forward, then that, I mean, I know it's still a bottom line number, but the intent of the amendment is clear to the voters.
You're gonna move
Then
money,
your-
you're not gonna add.
Your appropriation is already in for next year.
Yeah,
It would be,
You
so it'd be in
folks
twice
already
now,
have a
though.
budget.
Yeah.
yeah. And you know, the budget committee will be all over that.
It's, I don't want to get into heavy dialogue, but it's really the philosophy of the school board. Do you want to make it
See, the-
a school district-funded athletic
Correct.
program?
The
That's-
money
That's it. That's.
To run the
there's no more than
program is in the operating budget. So it's funded. Where the revenue comes from is
No,
where.
the
is-
expenses are allocated.
The expenses are allocated. Where the revenue comes from is right now, it comes from through the self-funded activities of the Friends of Litchfield Wrestling Program. And the question will be, once the SAU does a little bit of work, they'll come back and say, this is how we believe the athletic department and whatever.
So, I guess, in-
Frank said he's gonna have two options, remember? You were gonna have a plethora
No,
of
the
options.
superintendent said he would have numerous. I said,
You said too.
well, and the one option is to keep it self-funded, quite frankly. I mean, I'll express my concern here this evening, is that we have a self-funded program for this current fiscal year that the district is paying out expense. I want to make sure that the revenue is in, because we've already set the tax rate, we've already set the revenue anticipations. So we have to look at that, and it doesn't sound like a lot of money, but you have a number of self-funded programs out there that if all of a sudden were to be converted, there needs to be a plan put in place for that, and not the current fiscal year.
and nobody's, I don't think we're talking about the current fiscal year.
No, we're not, but I'm expressing my concern as well, is that when you start shifting money around, there is a consequence to it.
I mean, in the simplest terms, the people at deliberative approve the budget number. If it's 20 million, it's actually 20,800,000 or 600,000, whatever the number is. They approve 20 million, they implicitly approve revenue. They don't know the breakdown of the revenue. We put up an estimate, but we really don't determine revenue till September when we file our revenue expectations with the DRA. So we say we're gonna get $8 million from all the state and federal revenues combined. The rest has to be made up by taxation. The self-funded line, we would just adjust down by the budgeted amount, and then that would fall down to the taxation line. So that's why I said it's really a question of revenue for the school board, and where do we want to account for that revenue, which we wouldn't do until September at the latest anyway. But typically, we set it over the summer, and then we don't really adjust it unless
Right.
we find out the state's going to pay more or pay less.
Well,
than
it's out there
something.
now. I mean, the MS-27, the
Yeah,
Budget Committee's
has
report
expected
has
revenues.
expected revenues, it's just a projection. And again, it's a dollar for dollar. So if, as the Budget Committee has asked, if you go to the self-funded total budget, that is equal to the self-funded revenues that we're projecting dollar for dollar. So that's why I'm saying, if the board were to make a decision to district fund, that will be out of balance. So we'd have to make some adjustment there.
Now, to their concern, I think what they're getting at is, they don't want to wait for us to make a decision and leave them possibly hanging after deliberative's already over. If they did motion to raise the athletic budget by $10,500, yes, it's not going to be in there twice, but now they're guaranteed to have the money in there if it passes, and it would be up to the board just to not to spend the other $10,500 because it wouldn't be funded.
Make the accounting adjustment there,
Basically,
based on
yeah.
that.
And I think the concern is, given the discussion that's going on, I think Friends of Litchfield Wrestling is trying to find the best way to guarantee that it will be part of the district budget.
Yeah.
And I think that's why the option of putting it, or an amendment to the warrant article at the deliberative session is being brought in front of you to see if that may be
But that is
viable.
only,
That's the
then you're
budget.
in there twice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only thing you can do at deliberative is change the appropriation. You cannot impact the revenue at deliberative.
But there's nothing saying a citizen couldn't put it in twice if they wanted to.
You can
I mean,
put
they
it in
could-
as much as you want. It's
mean,
still,
you-
right
you
now.
can get people to vote for it.
Well,
Can I mean,
what's gonna
let me just
happen
finish my point.
is,
Yeah.
If it goes in 3 times, then it's 36,000 self-funded. I will raise the revenue of the self-funded. In other words, if,
Why would you raise the revenue so
because
far?
they can't put it in unless you, from the floor, want to put it in as a different program.
Couldn't they
That's, I
just-
think, what they're
Wrestling-
They could
saying.
just add
You,
They want to
10,000
add
to the bottom line.
10,500 to the operating budget, not to self-funded.
And the school board could use it however it wanted to, but the
self-funded is an
expectation.
operating budget
No,
line.
that's why I'm
So
arguing,
it's going to get very confusing.
I don't
just-
think you want to do that. I think,
That's my suggestion. You don't want to do it. This board needs to make a decision as to whether or not you want this particular program to be funded through taxation.
that's why it's,
So then, just to follow up on that, then Friends of Litchfield Wrestling will be at the will of the school board making the decision whether it goes from self-funded to being funded by, it would need a majority vote, we need 3 of you out of the 5 in order for that to pass.
yes. But the devil's advocate inside of me would argue, even if you added that money, you still need the school board to change the revenue.
I understand that, but I think the school board would look at the intent when the warrant article was amended, that the intent of that amendment was to fund the wrestling program.
so playing devil's advocate, if your motion gets voted down, should we look at that intent? Because I'm pretty comfortable with the fact that you'll have 8 vote against it on the budget committee, because they're not going to, they will speak strongly against the fact that you're double funding a program. And so then it becomes a numbers game on a Wednesday night. And I think, my feeling is, you should allow the school board to do what they need to do. We'll have this resolved on the 19th of February if the chair gets the homework and everything done. You'll know on the 19th where the board should be. At least that's what I would hope would occur.
One other
But you won't be
caution
here.
I would make to you as well
Right.
is Litchfield's the home of no means no.
I could
Okay.
call in.
So if you get this to be amended on the floor and it gets defeated, then it would be very difficult, even though it's not a warrant article, it's from the floor and it gets voted down, to come to the board, because the intent of what you attempted to do at deliberative, you're now coming to the board, so I think that would put the board in a difficult position versus today. They have your request, and I would suggest that you work through it with the superintendent and myself and see where we can go with it.
In devil's advocate, but yes would mean yes. If we were to successfully pass it at the deliberative session, then it would be, put the school board in that same position to fund it. And I know we're gonna get into the
In the
argument
other
about.
direction.
Right, gee, we're gonna get into the argument about revenues and appropriations, and I understand that, but if we're talking about intent, I think that can work both ways as well.
It's your choice.
No, I understand, I'm just putting it out there, and I mean, the point was, Friends of Litchfield Wrestling was wondering how the school board would feel about that, if they would be in favor of that amendment when it came time.
Well, again, we can go back and forth with this. The only thing you can do is change the appropriation.
right, she's saying to
Okay.
increase it.
But the appropriation is in the general fund. How that appropriation is funded is your decision as a school board.
I don't think you have to worry about it at this level. I think it's gonna be fine.
The
My personal opinion, but just looking around. I think
voters
it's
don't
fine.
make a decision as to how things are funded. The school board does. Voters are given our estimated revenues to support, and quite frankly, they want to know how much of that's going to drop to the bottom line. The voters can't decide how you as a school district fund your programs. That's my point I'm trying to make, is.
All they can do is vote the
They
appropriation.
can vote the appropriation. That's the only thing that can happen at deliberative, is to make those changes up to 10% of the recommended budget committee school district budget.
And every time you raise the operating budget, you run the risk of people voting against it because they look at the spread between what the default is and what the operating budget is.
Oh, no, I understand that,
But it's already
increasing
in the
the
appropri-
operations.
it's already
budget
appropriated
comes with
next
the
year.
risk.
I'm saying
It's in the
if you
budget.
upped it by 10
Right.
grand, there's another $10,000 difference.
Add to that spread.
Maybe it doesn't make a difference, but my opinion, I think the board heard what you had to say tonight, and, I was in favor of it 2 years ago, I was in favor of it last year, I'm in favor of it this year. I think it's the right thing to do for the school community. It is purely from the revenue perspective, and then by putting it into the operating budget and funding it, we make it part of the education that we provide as a district from that point on. The attorney was pretty clear. If you self-fund something, you're saying it's not part of your curriculum. You're saying it's a good thing, you can use the school to do it, but you're going to pay for it, versus moving it in and adding it to the budget. We're saying it's part of our approved curriculum, and we're going to fund it, whether it's a drama presentation, a co-curricular activity, or a sport, or new classes like we talked about tonight. That was my argument 2 years ago. We want to add a calculus class. We're not asking on a warrant article to add a calculus class. The board says it's part of the curriculum. We believe it's the right thing to do. And in my opinion, that's what we get elected to make decisions on, so.
There is a regulatory requirement for high schools to offer a co- and extracurricular activities that includes athletics.
But
Period.
we're
And it
free
does
to
not-
decide the scope of that, which that's,
Did you say co-ed?
Co- and
Oh.
extracurricular. So
Oh.
co-curricular and extracurricular.
Okay.
I understand all sides of the argument. Thank you.
Thank you. So we
I
can,
think there's a scheduled school board meeting after the deliberative, if it doesn't run too late on the 5th, so maybe there's enough opportunity to get the information to the school board so they can make a decision on the 5th. So,
February 5th? Thank you.
Thank you.
thanks.
Hope we can count on your support.
Guys gonna leave this time?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Is the match over?
12 hours.
Is the match over?
Yes, we beat Franklin 60 to 18.
That's a long ride home losing.
It was
Yes,
right
you
after
did.
presentations?
No.
Oh, that's correspondence. Yes, I did move it up. Yeah, sorry. I saw correspondence, I thought community forum.
No worries. Jason Garrett, 11 Perry Court. Dr. Cochran made a statement earlier when he referred to Mr. Pascucci's idea. And I heard a lot of devil's advocate playing tonight. I'm going to play my own. Fortunately or unfortunately, voters the last time were asked about this said no, resoundingly. And so I'm not a fan of waiting till September and then adjusting down and then 3 people raising our tax rate after the fact. To me, that's disingenuous and goes to credibility and trust, and it is for me, and it is for a lot of people I know, the wrong way to do that. Be upfront, be honest, ask folks, and they'll do it. I think, again, Dr. Cochran's, what I felt from this side was the fair way of doing it is you include it in the whole program, and you figure out then how to sort the dollars out, right? You divvy it up with whatever formula, and then everybody shares the burden of a little bit of fundraising. I think that's appropriate and fair and whatnot, rather than simply adjusting your revenue and sticking it to the bottom of the tax form, right? Lastly, I know you guys are going to talk about the default budget tonight, and I didn't notice it in the handouts, but you guys are going to discuss it. There are still, from the last version that I saw, there was still a number of issues in that default budget. One of them, a big one was the self-funded. I think it was $27,000. Non-sped transportation, $55,000.
I think the one we approved had all those level funded.
Well, it may have. I'm saying it's the last one I saw. And I know you're going to finalize it tonight, but and I thought you guys had an attorney's opinion coming too. So I know you guys at the last meeting you were going to send it out, but I know John York at the last meeting said he's willing to see someone spend the $200 to challenge it, but the reality is it's not about challenging it. Nobody wants to challenge it unless we're made to challenge it. There's a group of folks in this town that are at their wits' end financially and otherwise. It's not about $200. It's about fixing this ambiguity that some people have with this law. A lot of folks don't see the ambiguity. The problem is nobody regulates it. There's no one in charge of seeing it. And in this state, the only entity that can review it is the Superior Court, unfortunately. Because if it was simply calling up, there's Ed Murdoch, who used to be the guy, for schools that you could call, and he'd lay down the law, you used to be able to do that, right? You call DOE, and they can lay down the law on things, and DRA on the operating budget can tell you. Unfortunately, when it comes to doing the default budget, the only person, the only arbiter is Superior Court. And I'd hate for Litchfield to be not only the no means no originator, but also be known for having to fix a default budget that the legislature won't clarify until it has to because of a court decision. So anyway, I hope you guys hand out or put out on the website what the final version of that will be. I'm anxious to see it. Thank you.
Thank you. Correspondence?
Yes. Frank Byron sent us something. Send it on to Michelle. And I think, Dr. Cochran, you may have received it also, but it was a grant fundraiser for physical education from Frank Byron. Did you remember seeing that? Okay. I sent it on to Michelle.
Okay.
But it was an opportunity, and I went in and read it. It sounds like our district, I believe, by what I read, would qualify. But it's an opportunity to get a grant for physical activity for the students. And so it's due on the 31st. So I would hope that, I don't know if we have a grants, I do know we have a grants committee. I don't know if they're functioning, but if there's a way to get that processed and get submitted in the next 9 days, I think it would be a great opportunity to enhance the physical education activities. And other than that, I think that was all I had.
That's all I saw come across.
And there was Kathleen Folis who thanked us for allowing the voters to see the teacher's contract. Letting the voters vote.
Let them vote.
Draft minutes, 1/8/14.
I'll make a motion to accept them.
Second.
Any discussion? All's in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 3-0. Draft minutes, 1/16/14.
Again, I'll make a motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 3-0. Now we have a superintendent's comments. Now we're back on schedule.
Yeah, almost. Yeah, pretty close. As long as he's 2 minutes.
Yeah, he said it should be quick.
Some time ago, I mentioned to you that we would be looking at, I think it was about a year ago, that we'd be looking at the student information system and indicating that it was crucial in our moving forward in several areas, including how we're using technology in classes. The first step in this really is a significant upgrade in the functionality of the student information system, the SIS. So we have, Kyle and I and Steve spent a lot of time last year working with a gentleman from Two Revolutions who were paid consultants to the Department of Education. We were able to get in on the very first meeting about information and data systems and got a lot of free consulting out of them. The contract expired, but at the same point in time, we didn't have enough information to make it actionable for make the change to new student information system for 13-14. So at this point in time, we're looking to put a committee together to look at moving to a new student information system. For the last couple of years, we have been setting aside the refund monies that we receive through the E-rate process. It's a refund purchase funded by federal dollars, which allows you to submit, and then for internet connectivity, for, here's a list of all the things that are allowable. And then you get a rebate based on, in part, what you spend it on, and also on your percentage of free and reduced lunch. So we've been setting that aside, knowing that this is a critical need in our system, and knowing that the transition of a new student information system can be very expensive, anywhere from $35,000 to $50,000, just on the pulling the data and setting the system up. And there's also a back of house cost as well for the whole setup. because I remember when we made the transition in Nashua, and so when you went in and said, okay, so what's the report card look like in this? And they said, whatever you want. You have to create it. You can either hire somebody to do that back of house programming for it, or they can do it for you at $1,000 a day. We're at the point where our system is extremely dysfunctional to the point it's literally hindering us. So I just want to take you through and get you up to speed on the specifics of this, because we talked about it in general terms last year before we sent out the emails and asking people to serve on the committee. I felt it would be appropriate to update you, answer questions that you have, and make sure that you were both informed and on board. So here's a quick overview. A student information system is in some ways analogous to an ERP, an enterprise resource planning package. Originally designed as a system to manage student data. I mean, there may even be a couple of very small districts that are using Excel spreadsheets. Even at our size, a student information system makes sense. So it's almost always a relational database. The only student information system that I know of that's not a relational database is Rediker, ours, which is a flat file structure.
That means proprietary.
And not web-based. You have to be inside the firewall to access it. So teachers can't access grade. And it has a grade book, but the grade book is not exceptional, and so we actually use Edline to put our grades in. The total fees between Rediker and Edline are about $23,600 a year. That's not counting the couple of people that we have on stipends to do things like go in and roll the grades over manually. Mr. Perot does that here at the high school. We have somebody at the middle school, or at the elementary school, who helps teachers enter their grades and comments on Edline. That stuff has been routinized and automated in every other district that I've known of since the late 90s. So the SAS does scheduling. It becomes the de facto CUME card. Anything you need printed out, you print out and you stick in the physical CUME card if you have to have it. So database is searchable through a query. You can get the data that you need to make good decisions. From that strictly database function, SIS usually have electronic web-based gradebook. We've got a gradebook. It is electronic. It's not web-based. And the rollover of information from the teacher entry to what the parents and the students can see is not automatic. It has to be done by hand. A web communication portal. X2 in Aspen, well now Follett Aspen. In Nashua, parents can get their login and go in, single login, you have a kid at each level, doesn't matter. One login, you get all 3 kids' profiles come up. You can go in and set grade notices. I have a kid in high school, and I'm going to be concerned anytime they get a grade lower than a B-. And so I set my parameters up to send me an email at the email that I enter. Whenever the teacher hits send on a grade that's less than a B-, I get an email. I can go on and check my kids' attendance to see if they were tardy today. Infinite Campus has an app for the iPhone or an Android. So you can be literally, walking through the mall and checking your kids' grades.
Got to get that B+ to get in the honors course.
What's this, son?
So, the portable, more functionality in the grade book. The reporting data is so much more functional. Role-based calendar. Here's one for students, here's one for staff, here's one for community, so that you have that. SIF compliance, that's just a data specification that allows the interoperability of this data with other data. Ours is not SIF compliant. At the next level, you look at course management capability, so course management systems or learning management systems. If you've taken a college course in the last 10 years, you're probably familiar with Blackboard. We're now at the point where student information systems often have some capability. The level of capability is not that of Blackboard. It'll cost you more for Blackboard for everything else that's here. But if we're going to move towards computing-based teaching with the expectation that kids will have technology in their hand, there's no sense doing anything until we have a system that will support that on the teacher side. It needs to be web-based. It needs to have a course management functionality. That functionality is going to improve for most people over time, but that's one of the criteria that we're looking at. We also believe we can get this functionality for at the current rate or cheaper. So, posting of materials, students reply, an integrated email tool, synchronous communication, so you've got wikis, you've got threaded discussions for asynchronous and so on. If you move strictly to competency-based, the draft minimum standards for public school approval, finalized on November 11th, no longer refer to credits. It refers to courses and high school graduation competencies. And if you want to meet your high school graduation competencies by embedding them in things called courses, you can do that. But you don't have to.
What does that mean? Embedded by courses, does that mean, I guess,
The graduation criteria, you have to offer courses, but graduation technically would be determined, if they pass as is, by demonstration of the competencies, which means that you could offer courses, but you could have somebody come in and say, I can demonstrate those 2 economics competencies by going and do this. You say, great, do it. Checked off, done. We may have a set of regulations.
the extended learning lab?
That's why you need your ELO policies in place, and you need to be able to fund them and so on. But the complexity is how to manage kids who are at different places at different points in time, instead of taking the groups of kids that start at their 5 and move them along the same conveyor belt, even though they're not operating at the same level. And how do you track their progress and monitor the progress? Because I think we all know that as it is now, we have students who are moving forward who are not in command of all of the things they need to be in command of and get moved on to the next grade level because they're in a cohort model. If you want to make significant progress in that, we have to be able to do a better job of documenting their progress and using that progress to determine what the next step is. And it can't be the same next step for every kid in grade 3 if we're going to get where we need to go. There has to be some differentiation. And so some students are going to demonstrate competency earlier than others. And education, both post-secondary and K-12, is becoming increasingly modularized. And in New Hampshire, it's being modularized not into things called units, but into competencies. And we're at the forefront of this, which means in some cases it's a very good thing, in some cases you're on the bleeding edge. We're trying to be somewhere in between. This is part of a PowerPoint actually produced by Two Revolutions and Brian Setzer. And it was produced as part of a PD session that I was in San Diego last year, funded by the CCSSO, the Innovation Lab Network Group, the group of 10 states that are trying to lead the way nationally for competency-based education. So competency-based education, or CBE, is a fundamentally different thing. We need our systems to do different things, including at least track and manage students and groups and cohorts, not or. So you're going to have data on a kid who's a part of a group, and then a group within a group, and then a group within a group. It's a different level of functionality.
What's the definition of cohort again?
I'm sorry?
What's the definition of cohort again? I hear you use all the time.
Same group goes through in one
Okay.
class. We do that to some extent now with courses, but the courses is the smallest amount that we break it down. Manage student progress and continuous improvement. We need to do a better job of being able to have in our database structure accurate information about what the kid can and can't do. Right now, it's 75. So is that 75 because the kid is brilliant but lazy? Or a bare pass who's working their butt off and is just as sweet as can be to the teacher? Because 75 doesn't tell you that. It needs to be integrated, interoperable, and needs to be able to demonstrate evidence of learning if we're going to be competency-based. There's nothing within according to their expectations, 3 to 5 years before we get the first generation of student information systems that'll do everything. So nothing that does everything exists as a single entity. But there are 3 basic types of functions that need to be there. Student information system, SIS-like functions. Any comprehensive competency-based approach needed will incorporate or link to individual student information system. That's got to be there. Right? Learning management-like systems. So control over what resources are available, expand learning beyond regular school hours, communicate better, facilitate fully online learning, hybrid learning, flipped learning, and assessment function, more data. Instead of data residing in individual teachers' grade books, we need to be able to compile data. And that includes, instead of having a separate resource over here that looks at smarter balanced data, we can embed all of that achievement data in students, and we can start to look at correlations between grades and other types of achievement. So here are potentially competency-based solutions, but they run across that entire gamut. So learning platforms, educate, mileposts, these show evidence, right? So this is tools specifically to support the competency piece. They may be a standalone, they may be something you can add on because they're CIF compliant. Systems built to manage and deliver learning resources, Blackboard, Moodle. We have several teachers who are using Moodle. And it is basically a learning management system, but it sits out there, right? You can have everybody in the district on it, but the problem becomes it doesn't connect very well to everything else. It can have curriculum on it, but we need curriculum over in the student information system. Building blended approaches. Schoology, we have some teachers on, so that social learning environments, to some extent Moodle is in that group. Edmodo, Haiku, and Schoology, and then a traditional SIS. And what we're tending to see now is a blending of these tools together. So if we look at traditional SISs, Global Scholar, Infinite Campus, Live Cloud, Performance Plus, which is the parent company of Performance Plus that we get our NECAP data from. Power School and Skyward were identified as the student information system. These things started as student information systems, they're migrating this way. Okay? Nobody's blended all this into one platform yet. But the question is, what are the functions that we really need to have? Because when you invest in a student information system, it's a minimum 7 to 10 to 12-year investment. It could cost us between $50,000 and $100,000 to make the transition. You don't want to be doing it every 3 years.
Brian, what's the significance
The
of
red are two of the ones that we're quite interested in.
Oh, okay.
And we'll highlight those. So here are the sort of functions. Here's the learning management system functions, the SIS functions, and the assessment functions. So diagnostic assessments, online assessments, item banks, test questions. All of that falls into one of these 3 categories. So what we need is something that can do these functions, but we need to prioritize what the functions are, and how does that fit in where we want to be in 3 years, 5 years, 8 years, 10 years. Does that make sense? And how do we do it in a way that, as much as possible, holds to a level cost of ownership? There's a report the Gates Foundation funded, because they, very much like a competency-based approach, funded some research on what are some of the existing SISs and how do they match up to the most important of these functionalities. So, and they had to, the criteria was they had to have components that would address competency-based education, which means teaching, learning, and reporting. And in that, they had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 that they felt did that. There are 3 in here. 2 of the 3 were identified last year. In fact, the 4 that we identified with Brian Setzer were Infinite Campus,
Fee management.
Global Scholar,
Full at Aspen.
Power School, right?
Full at Aspen is, I think, in your next set of
Sorry?
slides. Full at Aspen.
Yeah. Full at Aspen was formerly X2 Aspen. So I'll give you a little bit in detail, but if you look at there's some of these that hit all of the marks. Some of them do it better than others. For example, our system does have a grade book. It's just, we have to use third-party software, and it's manual, and it doesn't push information to parents.
So when it says third party, that means that whatever they're offering, they don't support, but they have they have a partner that you can get this service from.
And different companies have very different approaches as to how they structure their contract and how they do add-ons. Pearson is actually owns PowerSchool. So this is just the next slide. These are less important pieces. These are stuff, can they do a student portfolio? If you look at the ones on this end of the continuum, they are portfolio evidence-oriented, where the other end of the portfolio tends to be more traditional SIS-oriented. Between last year and this report that I just found recently, we've identified 3 that we think are worth starting at. Not that we throw everybody else out, but we know that there are 3 that we need to look at more closely. And they're PowerSchool, Follett Aspen, and Infinite Campus. So, talked about the background piece about Brian Setzer, series of meetings. They went back, did their research, gave us a list with that through a bunch of webinars. So these 3 were all on that screen of 10, right? They all tend to be strong in the traditional SIS model because we absolutely need that. The data piece is the piece that I think is the least important of the functionality. Because if we don't have the learning management piece, we can't go where we want to go in the teaching and learning side. It's harder for teachers to have your learning management piece as a separate piece than your data. It's nice if you can put it all in one place, but if you have to use a separate login, the assessment function, accessing assessment data, is less problematic than if it's the learning piece. You want a single line on, you do your attendance, you got your grades, you've got your, everything is there in front of you. So this piece, the importance of something that's already in New Hampshire. It means that somebody else has already spent the time and the effort to figure out how to do state reporting and troubleshoot it. It also means that the company has supported state reporting, and so they will be able to answer your questions if you have any cheaper and more quickly. And it also means that you can do site visits to see how it's really working, and you've got a support group. Right. Those 3 meet all of those criteria. There may be something else out there, but right now these 3 hit all the marks and have the core of what we're looking for. PowerSchool, owned by Pearson, it's the most commonly used SIS in New Hampshire. Very strong traditional functionality in a student information system, a little bit slower to develop some of the newer enhancements and moved more on the teaching and learning side. They are, I believe, the majority owner of Edmodo. The Pearson model, and I'm going to editorialize, is basically they have your basic PowerSchool, and then when they add products at a end user cost. And so they enhance their base, but they enhance the base and they also apply costs for additional modules. That's been their business model. When they do something, they do it on a big scale because they're that large. And the acquisition of new products has been dominant in this in the last 5 years. So X2 Development Corporation in Hingham created X2 Aspen, which was bought out by Follett. So it's now Follett Aspen. And Follett, of course, is the largest library software folks in the world. So the question is, PowerSchool is probably the easiest. Kyle transitioned his old district to PowerSchool. It's well known. It's a stable product. It doesn't touch as many on the where we want to be in 3 to 5 to 7 years as the other 2 at this point in time. We don't think. Follett Aspen, first used in New Hampshire in 2008. I started in Nashua in the fall of 2007. We did a search process similar to what I'm going to lay out for you in a little bit. The decision was made with Follett Aspen and we transition for the 2008-9 school year. There are 4 major districts, there may be more, but Manchester, Nashua, Londonderry, and Hopkinton. Manchester, Nashua, and Londonderry, in order, are the 3 largest districts in the state. One of my concerns about X2 is a very powerful database, great scheduling module, but resource-heavy behind house. So when we make decisions about these, we have to look at functionality, we have to look at cost. To make the transition, we have to look what's the ongoing cost in terms of the subscription cost, and then what's the ongoing cost of ownership back of house. So.
Dennis's question.
But those are, and that's why it's nice to know that you've got people in here who can tell you, yeah, it's great, but that additional information is important. Infinite Campus, the largest American-owned SIS in the U.S., 6.5 million students, 43 states. They've also been in New Hampshire since 2008, in Portsmouth. Since then, Newmarket, Rochester, Bow, and Salem have transitioned. And I'm told that Sanborn, who I think 4 or 5 or 6 years ago went to a new student information system, is now transitioning over to Infinite Campus. Because the system that they bought into 4 or 5 years ago doesn't do what it needs to do on competency and on the teaching and learning side, is my understanding. And they already have their Android smartphone app and iPhone app, so you can do your login on the go. Procedurally, we have a fairly large committee of about 15 to 18 people. That includes secretaries, administrative assistants, because they're the ones who enter the database information. We've got teachers from all 3 levels, administration. We are actually looking for a board member representation. This is an important decision. It's going to set the platform for where we go in the next several years. So whether that's several people rotating in, but here's the process that we've discussed. Establish a representative committee, and the list is ready to go. We want to meet probably twice. So what's our current functionality mapped against these criteria, and then identify and prioritize the selection criteria, including cost of transition, cost of subscription, and cost of ownership over time, especially backup host tech support.
Well, no, when after you do that, are you going to supply that to the vendors? So when they come to the presentation, they kind of address what things you're looking for and stuff? Or?
I know in Nashua we did not, but we made sure we had that information, but we didn't explicitly tell them what our criteria are. But I think it's pretty important that if you're asking people in the end, I mean, we're going to have people from the committee come to the board and say, here's what we recommend, here's why, right? Then people need to know exactly, what are the functions that we need to perform? What are the criteria that we're going to need to use to make an informed decision? And then what's the process? So getting people on the same page with respect to that framework, that decision framework. Probably, if we find all 3 vendors to be suitable, once we go through that process, we'd ask all 3 to come in. The one that I know the least about is Infinite Campus, so I've already contacted them, and they're ready to schedule a date.
Will they also supply like a product roadmap, so you can see?
Sorry?
So your first problem with, like, say, Power School was you weren't sure, usually they're a little slow to get the new stuff. Will they supply a roadmap of what they plan on doing for the next year or 2?
And that's part of the process. So we will be in touch with them and say, here's what we're looking for. Here are our broad criteria. The question was, it really is, do you go further and give them, here's our actual rubric that we're looking at.
So Mike, just a real quick question on that. So you said something about cost, and I guess for the committee, wouldn't we want them to be more concerned about functionality and not so much the word of ease of use, but in a process that
No question.
any parent or any child or anybody, and less concerned about the cost of that process? Because, see, I would much rather them come to us and say, here are the 3 vendors. And this is why vendor A is so strong, and vendor B is this, and vendor C is this, irrelevant to what the cost should be, because I don't believe they, see, I would hate for them to get caught up into thinking that, well, we're going to go recommend B or C because A was too expensive, but in reality, as you said, we don't want to be in Sanborn's position in 4 or 5 years making a second decision.
I think the key is keeping the board informed as we go through and identify what are the things that are non-negotiable in our new student information system, and what are the things that we'd like to have, and keeping cost, those 3 different types of costs, in a perspective. And talking to the person from Infinite Campus, they estimated that given our 3 schools with the size that we have, the district edition would run under $20,000, and it includes a support contract. Well, right now we're spending $23,600 between the 3 schools without the support contract, and we pay 2 stipends, so probably another $3,600 to do the things that the existing one doesn't do automatically, basically. So we're up around, $27,000 for what's happening now.
But also, don't we have a requirement for certification either for the high school or for the district where we have something in writing that requests that we get a program like this in place, that we're supposed to be tracking?
Wasn't there a kneecap or a NEASC? Wasn't the student information system one of those?
Student information system, I'm sure, is part of the NEAS criteria. It should be. But I mean, there are some small districts. 4 to 5 years ago, when I was on the accountability task force, I was told that we still have people who are submitting their data, not as an Excel spreadsheet, but a series of nested Excel spreadsheets. Was their student information system?
Well, I remember Elaine, Dr. Keller, telling us that we had to get a student information center that could track a student from kindergarten through graduation across everything they did, including artwork or whatever it was, and that there was a requirement of the district to get there. We weren't getting there very fast because we had a lot of other issues at the time.
A big focus 2 commissioners ago with the Follow the Child movement, and so the focus really became, let's make sure we're able to follow students over child instead of treating them at a point in time. Let's look at growth as opposed to only achievement. But I mean, NEASC, when you do your self-study, if it comes up that what we have now is not strong, which is what happened, my understanding is the last NEAS report, then NEAS comes in and says, so what are you doing to fix this? Right? What's your plan? Yep. There is external accreditation can be good. Most of what you learn from external accreditation, you learn in the self-study if you do a good self-study. And then partway through, somebody in the committee goes, so what do you want us to put in the final report? Tell them we need more money for the yada, yada, yada. Right? And I'm sure that never happens.
So John, in principle, I agree with what you said about cost, but if option A is twice the cost of option B, and it's got 2 more things that the committee deems are minor, I kind of want them to say, we considered it, it was prohibitively expensive to provide these small benefits. I think that would be part of any report that the committee would bring forward, versus, yeah, we looked at option A and it was just too expensive.
And quite honestly, this is a big decision. It affects every SAU employee, teachers, it affects parents. And if the committee is
so nobody's going to be happy, is what you're saying.
But if the committee is
mad and half of them happy, we're in good shape.
You know what? These are the 2. This one's more expensive. Then you could come to the board and say, well, here's what we got.
No, I'm just saying that I think just so long as the first criteria isn't cost.
Well, let's extend this.
And I'm okay with the understanding.
But let's extend this 3 to 4 years out. In which case, if we have, for example, a 1-to-1 computing system in the high school where every kid is given a laptop or has a bring your own device, you now have, if we're providing a laptop as a freshman they're going to use for 4 years, you're now supporting and managing close to 500 laptops. So what's the functionality that the student information system has to do that? Do you want to be in a situation where every time something breaks, the kid has to bring the laptop in and we need to have somebody at a help desk sitting there helping them all the time? When you update the software, do you have to pull in 480 computers and manually update them? Or can we have an image done and Kyle just hit the button and 480 computer laptops, the next time they get in sight of Wi-Fi, automatically update with a new image, boop, done, right? And so that's really, I have a little bit of a proposal of what that rollout might look like over time, so you can see where the student information system fits in the context. So vendor presentations, if we think all three are viable, we look at them all. If a fourth came up that we want to look at, we would. My hope is that we would be down to 2 by the time we get to site visits, that we would have some sense of. And because they're all in the state, we could actually, in fact, high school administration went to Bow today to look at a couple of things, including becoming certified to accept for pay foreign exchange students, and what that process would do, and they're going to want to report on that in the next thing. And so they took the opportunity to take a look at Infinite Campus while they were up there, because Bow is one of the schools that is kind of an aspirational school for us. We share a lot of things in common with them. We'd kind of like to be in 5 years where they are now in terms of their achievement results. And it's interesting because if you look at the school districts that were Aspen, they're the 3 of the 4 largest, well, the 3 largest plus 1 more. If you look at all the schools that are on
Infinite?
Thank you. They're all small ones. And there may be reasons for it. And then a final recommendation. Now,
Yeah, when you spread it across
what
the
I will provide you with is just
3,000 students.
some thinking out loud of what the next step might be. And let me give you a handout.
You said you want a board member. I don't know if anyone else is interested. I would definitely be
Well,
interested.
or, you know, if somebody can
That's
handle,
bread and butter right here.
handle the vendor presentations and.
But we can
and,
share
you
it
know,
It's not in my wheelhouse.
So this is off the top of my head, what if we actually, because remember the board asked us to come back by the end of March with a relatively detailed proposal. So this is sort of the start of that, and these numbers are very rough. It may be a little low, but 2013-14, investigate S options, select a new vendor. All right, look at piloting some portable teacher technology, which may or may not be laptops. It might be
We're gonna make our
netbooks.
teachers portable? Do they know that? We didn't negotiate that in the
That's why
contract.
it's portable teacher technology, so teachers can be portable.
Why wouldn't
when
it
they
be
use it.
teacher portable technology? But that's okay.
Teacher portable technology?
Are they gonna, is the teacher portable, or is the technology portable, or both?
So install, test, and begin system and data migration. So when I spoke to the guy at Infinite Campus, he basically said, yeah, 35 to 50,000 all in, including all PD that you need on site at whatever a day. He said, given the size of the district and number of people that have to be trained, he said he would be amazed if it ended up coming in more. But that's, there's the licensing fee, which would be $20,000 or slightly less. So there's if you budget for 70,000 right off the top, I think we have more than that. And I think that's paying for the entire setup over that first summer. So summer of 2014, if we hit our timelines, would be giving teacher PD on taking attendance, getting the grade book, using the grade book, getting the competency systems in there over the summer so the teachers could report it. One of the difficulties that we have now is we don't report the competencies well. If you said to a kid, okay, so how many competencies you're passing or failing on your course right now, they couldn't go into the system and tell you. That's a problem. Especially since at the end, somebody's going to come up and say, oh, you got an 84, but you passed, you failed competency 3. That's really not the sort of thing you want hidden. Right? It should be up there, and so we need a student information system that can do that. So that would be year 1, would be this summer, and into year 1, give teachers a year to learn the functionality, half a year to learn the functionality, get their grade book down pat, and then the second semester, so just about, a year from next Monday, at the start of the second semester, open up the portal so that teachers' grades are real-time and available for teachers and students. When we did this in Nashua, we actually made it an option earlier. So the system was turned off on the automatic push to parents. But teachers could turn it on if they were ready sooner. It said everybody has to be ready to go for the second semester. And that's a pretty reasonable amount of time to do it. Enough to get them comfortable if they're not good users, enough to make sure that the courses have the same structure. But there is a PD cost, and we think we have enough to do
You
that.
mentioned earlier that a lot of the grades that are being put into Headline now are being handled by administrative staff rather than the teachers.
Well, not so much entered, but the supporting and troubleshooting, and
Okay.
it's,
The teachers enter them, but
the teachers
you
enter
pay a
them.
stipend for somebody to turn the crank every 2 weeks on Edline at the high school.
Right. And
Maybe it's district-wide, I
What
thought
does
it was
that
just
mean?
high school.
What does
Now,
that
there's
mean?
one at each
Make
school.
it-
That
Send out
means
the email that says-
You enter your grades and Brian enter your grades as you go along. And then every second Friday, I come in and say, publish John's grades, publish Brian's
Okay.
grades. And then the email goes out to the parents that says,
And they also
there's a new
support,
report that was posted. They bundle it into a report and post it.
Brian, your grades didn't roll over. What the heck happened? And now I go and meet with Brian and try and figure out what.
Okay.
But that has to do with the level of functionality, too.
Okay.
So there's both of those. So everybody,
Such a bad guy, Brian.
He didn't follow instructions.
so next year, if you look at this year by year, so year one is just get people up on the student information system, start to introduce, once we get back past the grading and the attendance piece, which needs to be pretty much ready for September. The next year, the plan would be to make one-to-one technology classes an elective for incoming freshmen. So if we have 120 freshmen coming in and 60 of them sign up and say, you know what, I want to be in the technology-enhanced classes, we could literally take the freshman teachers, make sure that they were the ones who had the priority for getting technology, give them their technology next year, right? 14, 15. And we'd have to find some money for that. But have them really get some PD around the student information system so that the next year, when they have an incoming, social studies class of freshmen, one or two of their sections, they would have technology that they would be able to plan on the kids watching a video. I spoke to one of the teachers who's tried some flipped learning, and I said, so how did it go? She said, great, with the kids who actually had the technology. But when a third of the kids come in and say, yeah, I didn't have access to technology last night, so I didn't do it, and you really can't question that, it's basically stopped, and she felt it was making a real difference. So
does that mean that this technology would be able to connect to a wireless network no matter what, even if there's no wireless network available?
well, it means that if you look at cloud computing, the great thing about cloud computing is you don't have to worry about stuff residing on your hard drive.
No, I was
But it
talking
only
about-
works when you've got Wi-Fi
I was
access.
talking about when you were saying the teacher said, a third of the students are able to do the work, so that, let's say we've provided some sort of device, will that device be able to
Access any Wi-Fi.
access Wi-Fi
Yep, anywhere.
just like a phone?
Yep. So, if you think of entering freshman classes, this year's freshman class would be no change, except that halfway through the year, they would be a group who their grades would now be the same with everybody else's. The year after that, that freshman class, parents and students would have a choice, could they opt for a technology-enhanced class or not? The next year, they would move up to juniors, or to sophomores, they would have that option again and again and again. So that becomes the group that does that all the way through. The group immediately behind them would be the first group that gets the technology handed to them.
For everybody.
So teachers have had a development year. They're still teaching some classes that are not technology enhanced, but they've got some that are. They're starting to develop the curriculum material, right? So the group that comes in behind now becomes all 4 core academic subjects for that freshman group of 2 years from September, technology-based, all core subject areas. And they keep that technology for 4 years. So we prepare the people who are freshman teachers, All right, now some of those will also be sophomore and junior and senior teachers, but scaffold it so that you're bringing in the level cost of technology for teachers and a level cost of technology for students at the same time, because you're outfitting a group of teachers and a group of students with an expected 4-year shelf life. So that constant cost of ownership at the end user level stays essentially the same. There are advantages and disadvantages. It's been estimated that the successful implementation rate, when you just give everybody a laptop and say, go, probably 1 in 20. Because people don't know how to.
$1 billion on apples and yanked the program within 90 days.
Once the kids unlocked them.
Well, the teachers weren't prepared.
Right, and the kids unlocked them. They were supposed to be only used for school, lockdown, yeah. It didn't last.
One-on-one implementation is done well at this point in time. I've got some articles I can forward you from people who work in the business, and I say it's basically spend money and pray in most cases. We're going to give people all this technology.
That goes over well in
And
Litchfield.
somehow,
And
somehow we're going to stand back and wait for the scores to improve and the kids get into better colleges. And it just doesn't happen, quite honestly. It needs to be thoughtful. It needs to be integrated.
Well, it's not like schools are doing it. I mean, Trinity's doing it up in Manchester, and they're having success with it. Ray People shared at a budget committee meeting that his son, who runs a charter school or private school down in Florida, they switched over and they were having success. So it's not as if there are numerous successes out there that offset a catastrophe like LA.
I think you'll probably find that those are schools with a barrier to entry, whether it's a financial
both
barrier,
private
an
schools.
application there, you've got to apply and get in like you do to a Catholic school or a private school versus, and LA I would think is just probably the worst possible example, but.
Well, and the reality is LA is more typical of the results of the spray and hope model. Let's give everybody technology and somehow
So
kids will learn more.
So Brian, the purchase and image, 120 PST units, that's the physical hardware?
That's
The
whatever.
device that we're gonna give to the
Yeah.
student? Okay.
So what would it be? Now, one of the issues becomes you could get, that's $500 per student unit and $600 per teacher unit. And the question is, within 2 years, can we hit that? Quite honestly, the Surface, the Microsoft Surface probably is enough technology. The problem is, it doesn't have a processor that allows you to control it and monitor it. It becomes a standalone unit, right? The Surface 2 will not. You have to go to the Surface Pro at this point in time, which costs out at around $900, right? Well, okay. So one of the questions that we're having both on the teacher side and on the I did tell you last year that we were going to try and pilot some teacher technology this year, and we've identified 3 different devices to use with teachers. The source of funding to use that is the money that we saved by not renewing Ceresc. So that was $5,139.80, and the cost for the 6 machines is $4,900 and whatever dollars.
I thought it was going to be 1% less.
I
So
thought it was gonna be 1 cent more. We were gonna have to find that penny.
So what we're looking at is a tablet that we think might be a very good tool for teachers who are not high-end users of technology. We're looking at the Surface Pro for a couple of teachers, and we're trying to, in conversations with, we're trying to work with teachers at all 3 levels. But I think we have.
Doesn't Google have a machine out there too?
Sorry? Chromebook.
Google, Chrome?
It's pretty limited.
Is it?
You have to be on the network.
If you're not connected, then it's pretty much a paperweight.
Isn't that the one where if it's, but everything that goes on there belongs to Google?
Probably.
Yeah.
It has to be because it's a proprietary OS.
What we're trying to do with the high school is identify people who are likely to be teaching freshman courses in a couple of years. So we're trying to identify some high users, low users, and match them. So we're looking at a tablet, which is sort of a medium device, a high end, which is something like a Surface 2. And the low end is basically a Lenovo version of a netbook, which comes in at under $500. It's got, I think, a 12 or 13-inch screen. Very robust. We've had them here before. They don't look pretty. They don't look slim. But they're durable. They got all the computing power. They've got a keyboard. You plug in your mouse, away you go. And so those are the three types of teacher technologies. And what we want to do is before we go and buy, 15 of something, we want to find out what is it good at. And we don't want to put an $800 machine in somebody who's only going to use $300 worth of functionality, quite honestly. I apologize for being cheap, but.
I mean, it's intriguing, and I've done a fair bit of investigation as my daughter prepares to go off to college, and virtually every college said, don't bring a tablet. It's insufficient for what you're going to be required to do, whether it's taking notes in class, whether it's writing papers, and they talk about a host of compatibility issues that the campus IT service won't deal with. So when you go in and you say, I can't print to the printer in lab, blah, 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 what are you using? Oh, I'm using my Surface Pro. Not supported.
Even the Surface Pros aren't supported?
They said they support laptops. There was probably 50% of the ones I looked at said we're not even going to support Windows 8. If you come with Windows 8, you're on your own. Because of driver availability, just a host of issues. So that may be why the Surface was out. And they said iPads are just not at all appropriate for what you need to do when you're in college.
I would
But
agree with
isn't,
that, actually.
granted, but isn't that a much higher rigor?
Which?
College, the expectations in
I
college?
mean, they're talking about writing papers, you're doing PowerPoints, your Excel, all your standard office tools.
Quite honestly, if you can't plug in a mouse, if you can't put in a USB port, I mean, if you can't copy and paste, I know this is on TV, but we had the Apple sales rep, the institutional sales rep, come to Nashua and bring us all in and show us how great the iPad was when it first came out. And I said, okay, I have 3 problems with it. No USB port, no mouse, and doesn't take flash. He said, oh, none of those are problems. I said, really? So I said, well, let me have some. So he did his little spiel, and I said, okay, good. We're taking a little break. Go ahead. Find a web page, any web page. He pulled it up. He said, cut and paste something. So he clicked on a picture. He said, there. I said, no. I said, I want the first 5 words of the first sentence. So he goes, click, and he got the whole paragraph. I said, that's not what I want.
Yeah.
He went, sentence. I said, I didn't ask for the sentence. I asked for the first 5 words. 6 tries for the sales rep to cut it off at 5 words.
After 2
Derek sits there with a Mac. I mean,
Mac's fine, the iPad. You can't
the interesting thing is, what I read was people said the laptop is more powerful, more durable, and it's cheaper. Everybody wants the newest technology of that tablet of whatever size, of whatever brand, of whatever OS, but
That is a Windows 8 tablet functionality. It disassembles, you can turn it on and back. I would say the tablet use for me is less than 0.5%.
yeah, it's typically very small. That's why I think if you're going to look at that, we're probably, and
I wouldn't be surprised if we're back to something that's very traditional.
I
And
keep
it's not
seeing
gonna be-
$1,000 laptops.
It's not
We
gonna
don't
be
need to be buying
fancy
$1,000 laptops. We probably need to buy $400 laptops. I mean, that's,
That's pretty much what the Lenovo netbook is.
Yeah.
yeah. And I mean, if you're going to buy in any kind of volume, like 120, you go out for a bid. I mean, that's what
Yeah, I
we
mean,
did.
there's companies that will, just there's a computer company right there in Hudson that can.
Now, again, there are
build
other
these
options
things,
depending on costs. You can do it as a strictly bring your own device. And those who have it go into the tech classes, and that's a way to approach it. Or you could say, well, to some extent, the taxpayers are now going to fund a benefit that other students have never had. People should pay some for this and go into, it's gonna cost you $100 lease a year, and now you own part of this.
Well, the
Right?
question I would have is, what happens with it at the end of 4 years? I mean, you're not gonna take it and give it to the next guy coming in, are you?
You're gonna have to recycle, you're gonna have to cycle the technology.
Or does it go with the student?
Because eventually, my guess is, I don't know if it's 2 years out or 8 years out, the tablet technology is gonna progress far enough that you're gonna eventually be able to get there at the
Yeah.
price point. You know, it's Moore's law, every 18 months, processing doubles and the price halves or whatever that.
Well, there's absolutely no doubt that by the time we get into this, whatever devices you're sampling today will not be the devices we'll be looking at using. But you'll have a very good idea of what the requirements are depending on whatever the device you are looking at.
And there may be some very interesting trade-offs. So for example, let's say you have a required course at the high school level that you aren't able to offer. Right now, we're required to offer in the program of studies 5 credits of business, even though we only teach 3, because nobody ever signs up enough to tell. The new programs, the new public school minimum standards, if they're passed, will be down to 3 credits of business. But what if you needed a full-time person back of house to support this? Well, where do you get the money to do that? Well, everybody takes at least one course through VLAX during their career. And you could let it, it's already paid for out of taxpayers' money. And it's basically being funded out of the, so the education is being funded, the adequacy grant, at pretty much a level fund. But because the population is dropping at 2% a year, that's more money every year to get moved over to VLAX. And that's pretty much what's happening. So there are some ways that you can be creative about this. It also allows you to get into some different models. And it also allows you to have kids take ownership of their own learning more. There's some good arguments to be made for doing this first at middle school, except that you don't want a kid to have this great middle school experience and then go to a high school and have bad technology. I mean, talk about turn kids off. This isn't a perfect model, but I think if we do it well, it lays out the sorts of framework to be thinking about where we want to be in the next 3 to 5 years. And so you see how this sort of connects to the whole student information piece and how it sets the framework for what are the core decisions that we need when we make this transition. So I've run it by Kyle, he's good with it. Julie, high school administration. We were talking before Christmas about the representation for the committee. So I guess I'm just looking, not for a vote or anything, just for the board, you know,
I
okay
think
with.
we have to vote to establish the committee, if it's gonna come back and brief the board.
That's true.
Under the board policy for advisory committees, which I think what you put up for what you expected the committee to do would do for the charter to start with, and then the first thing you do is ask the committee to flesh that out and bring it back, but.
I
How
mean,
many-
you got a pretty tight schedule if you're gonna be having people work on stuff for the summer, so.
What's your expected size of the committee? What do you?
We've had some preliminary conversations with some people. It's about 18. Not every, we expect, it's a lot, and there's a reason. We want to make sure we have one
Consensus.
librarian who really knows technology. We want to make sure we have one special ed teacher who knows technology. We have, middle school scheduling and high school scheduling are different. We want to have Dennis Perot, because he knows better than anybody else the inner workings of the competency-based model. So so Carrie Finnegan, who does the scheduling in the middle school, Mike Perez, who does more on the technology side. We've got an administrative assistant. We make sure we have a unified art teacher from each of the 3 schools, 1 or 2 classroom teachers from each of the schools. Barbara is the I4C coordinator. She's responsible for state reporting, so she needs to be there. Kyle. Frank is there. Julie, because she's curriculum, and we want to make sure that we can get curriculum in this. So it is a big group. My expectation is that the 2 meetings, which would be after school, would be attended by everybody. Everybody would also be at the vendor presentations, and then we would have a subset of people go on a site visit. So when we went in Nashua, we had a group of about 8 to 10 people. But you had to have that representation, so, because one of the other things that you want is somebody who can speak to us once a decision is made. And as soon as an administrative assistant says, this module is horrible, why was the decision made to do this? You have to have somebody who's there to say, here's what we saw, here's what we did. We recognize that there were other products had better functionality here, but this was a trade-off. So it's about getting the product that best fits us in the price, and also that we get buy-in with the entire vision. So far, the people that we've approached as sort of key people that we wanted have been very enthusiastic.
I'll make a motion to create a Student Information Systems Committee.
Second.
Any more discussion? All's in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries 4-0-0.
And
I'd be happy to have Derek be there.
Can we start it after deliberative?
What's that?
No, starts tomorrow.
Meeting next Wednesday.
Or even better, after the election.
He's really chopping your timetable down.
Thank you.
Did you not read the timetable there?
Oh, I read the timetable.
It's gonna be pretty tight. If we lose a month there, by the time we meet, we'll have to be estimating when we're gonna have the vendors in and start setting up vendors, because the guy from Infinite Campus basically said they're already booked 30 days out.
Well, I would imagine the time frame on this
Nationally,
is
30 days
you
out.
got to have a meeting in February, another meeting in March. Your vendors are coming in March.
Early March.
And you're at a point where you're coming back to see the board end of March, beginning of April, right after the election.
Jody would love to be able to schedule on the new platform, and I told her basically, don't hold your breath.
Yeah.
I mean, I would love to too, but
That's really moving fast.
That's really fast.
She's making us move fast,
it is.
which is good.
So, that's that. Thank you for your patience.
School board comments.
Yes. I'm not looking to have a fight with Mr. Garrett.
Oh, no.
Mr.
Well, that's
Garrett has
good
made it perfectly clear the last 3 or 4 months of speaking about the default budget on a weekly, bi-weekly, at every meeting. And not so much in the sense that he's asking how it's coming, but in a threatening way that if we don't do it exactly the way he likes it, he's got $200 to take to the Supreme Court. And I feel that that's just unacceptable from anybody. And while I understand he's going to have his comments, I would encourage the chair to begin to muzzle Mr. Garrett, because he doesn't add anything to the conversation. That's my comments for tonight.
Any more
Sorry about adding 10 minutes to the meeting.
We got public input.
Exactly.
Maybe we should make a motion to not have a public input tonight.
Any more comments?
That's enough.
That's enough. I'll say something real quickly. Actually, as we're talking about the math progress in the new program of studies, it reminded me of a couple conversations I've had with parents of 3rd and 4th graders. I don't know if it's just because they're probably getting hit the hardest by coming forward because they're seeing that grade level jump almost immediately, but I'm hearing a lot of parents talk about students struggling in math, specifically in the 3rd and 4th grade. And they're disappointed because there's a lack of resources there to help them with tutoring and stuff like that. I wasn't sure if that's something that, I'm sure, I know you're aware of it, but is there something we can do
one of the issues
about that?
that's come up has been the imbalance of tutoring support in
So we have tons of reading support.
versus math. And it is an issue. I think the good part about that is that the expectations are higher. The bad part is that students are
The
feeling.
expectations are high.
Okay. But students are feeling that they're not up where they need to be at that point in time, and that's being communicated to parents. So there's much good there, but you do have to you have to remember that in every grade level that's making this transition, kindergarten is no transition because they're coming in, right? And really there is, it's only grade 1. But each grade, the transition and the catch-up is more and more. So,
I see it perfect. I have a first grader who it's not a big problem with because they kind of got it last year and he's right on schedule. But then I have a third grader who's seeing that huge jump, and I definitely see it at home.
So while I understand Mr. York's comments, I would not recommend outright muzzling anybody, but if there are specific items that anyone from community input wants to address, that's fine. If there are just generic, repeated things, I would say, you could probably say, we understand your position, we're aware of your position. If there's something specific that you want to discuss or question, we're more than happy to hear that. If it's, and I would say whether it's, the wrestling guy comes every time from now till some decision is made and makes the same comments. Phil Reed, who's used to be the moderator and is often appointed the vice moderator by Mr. Regan, I remember when they had a meeting at LMS to talk about the high school for the first time, and there was this big line of people. Mr. Reed says, there's 26 of you. If you're all going to speak in favor of the high school, we can just say there's 26 people in favor of the high school because you're all going to say the same thing. And everybody's like, okay. You don't necessarily, I don't know that we have to hear the same things over again, but it is certainly Mr. Goretz's prerogative to express his opinion to the board.
Sounds good to me. So are we looking at ways to help with the math problem at GMS, or is there anything we can do?
We are increasing our math tutoring capacity.
Okay.
It's not as much as we would like to be, but we have to look at the fidelity of the the teaching and assess as we're going on. This is the year that we're supposed to be tracking the fluency levels, the numeracy targets that were set for each end of each grade. And
so multiplication tables, division tables, stuff like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we'll see where we are.
Any more school board member comments? Budget committee report?
Well, we did meet after the
Met
budget
during,
hearing.
too.
And met during, and we did, well, you all were there, we did get our budget, operating budget adjusted. We did have I was able to get our warrant article number 2 reopened by a 5-2 vote.
Which I was amazed because there was 8 people.
There's
there.
8 people there, and so I don't know who didn't vote, but somebody didn't vote, and they didn't get asked. And so we then had a discussion, and it seemed that the one person who seemed to be speaking mostly for the 4 that ended up voting no seemed to want to have questions answered, yet asked no questions. So we weren't in a position to answer those questions. We did provide them some information that they had requested about actual costs of raises and stuff like that, and how those numbers actually corresponded in percentages and dollar amounts across the average wages. So we were able to provide that information to the budget committee. They made comments about wanting questions answered about the health care, and I said, okay, yet no questions came. So I was sharing with Dr. Cochran today that I had actually seen this week, it was in the paper end of last week and over the weekend, where some budget committees actually were scheduling hearings this week specifically on having presentations and answers made on a contract that I guess had been presented enough time, but, they wanted to vote because that's being by Friday, so they were scheduling meetings this week. We had given the Budget Committee as much information as it seemed that they deemed necessary. They didn't ask any specific questions on the warrant. Yet 3 of the members did change their abstention and voted no. So the vote was 4-4. So it was not recommended by the Budget Committee based on information provided by Frank from DRA by a 4-4 vote. That's what will be placed on the ballot. And we did have a little bit of confusion on that, but I think at the end, it sort of worked itself out to the realization that that was the new stance of the Budget Committee, even though it was a tie. And then we didn't really discuss too many other line items in the school budget and stuff like that. Dennis sort of hung around in that too.
I actually spoke as a citizen during community input, and I questioned why some members abstained on one item that was presented that night.
Not others.
And not others. The answer I got was, well, the other ones weren't complex. When actually Mr. People said, I'm going to abstain on this because we got it tonight, and we typically don't do it, trying to be consistent. And I said, as a citizen, I look for that consistency. And Mr. Spencer said that, there were questions on the contract. And I said, well, I've heard many of you sit at this table say, we only ever deal with the financial aspects of the contract. And I said, I know, I watched the meeting, the financial aspects were presented. You had our representative from the school board, and you had the superintendent and the business administrator to answer any of those questions, at the meeting when it was presented for the first time and voted, and,
And the LEA president.
and if that didn't happen, whatever, and Mr. Spencer said he had questions and concerns about the health care, which was a cost item, which I guess you could argue it's a cost item. It's not as specific, whatever. I think somebody's going to walk to the floor microphone and ask the 4 people why they don't support the contract and at deliberative session, and at that point maybe we'll understand why 4 people voted against it. I did say I thought it was important that they were elected to vote on these things, and that the people had a right to understand how they voted or what they voted, so that there weren't 3 abstentions sitting out there, or an abstention on any other one for that matter, where there was an opportunity to vote on it. And
I would say the only person that why he voted no is Mr. Pascucci, who voted no because he said it's the cost. The other 3.
And I suspect the other 3 are going to say the same thing, and that's fine.
Fine.
It's they're entitled to vote how they see fit, and they get elected to make those decisions. So
Other than that, done for another season.
How was the New Hampshire School Board Association Assembly? Did you go?
It's good. Yeah, I think I mentioned the last time we get together.
That's right.
It was pretty good. It was actually a segment on Common Core, evaluation process. It was pretty good.
well attended?
What's that?
Was it well attended?
No, there was like 40
Wow.
some odd. I think there were about 10 or 12 didn't show up, I think, because of the weather.
Yeah, it's true. It was.
Yeah, it started about half an hour later than it was scheduled to.
Yeah. I remember they used to have,
That's just
the
Saturday.
2 times
Yeah.
that I went, there was well over 100 districts that were there. I mean, it was
Yeah.
very well attended.
Yeah. The last thing they mentioned is just they're looking for our support, all the schools, and, their fees are, our fees, should I say, is what helps support them and run their operations. So I kind of like that plan a little bit.
You see. I know you're going to be short next year. You might want to adjust your budget for for next year, because you're not getting any money from Litchfield. That's why you should have voted for everything that costs money.
Year-to-date budget status.
Actually, if I may, through the chair, if I could start with my report with the item C.
Audit findings? Yes.
The audit findings, which you have a copy of the letter from Blodzik and Sanderson for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2013, audit of the district. This is for your information purpose, as it comes directly from the CPA as your auditor for the district. I will be bringing to the board a corrective action plan. There are 3 items of concern that are being brought to your attention that I would have to go back and look at previous year audit reports to see if it's a continuation of the new areas of concern. But again, it's for your information, and I probably within the next 2 meetings, I will bring a corrective action plan on how we're going to proceed to correct those areas of concern listed by the auditors. I provide you with a copy of the MS-27, which is the Budget Committee's school district budget report that they will need to sign, and we will post that on Friday along with the school district's warrant and the school district's default budget. Would also, those 3 documents will be submitted. That was provided to the Budget Committee today, and I've heard back from a couple that said that they would be by tomorrow to sign off on the document. The year-to-date budget status is the 6-month fiscal year. A couple of highlights to it is that we've got to pay a little attention to the reporting mechanism that we report out to you. For instance, the revenue, we need to make it align with the MS-24. We have some work to do there. Bottom line, the district is at approximately a 6% unencumbered appropriation right now, which by comparison, I look back at last year, we were a little bit higher than we were last year. So there haven't been any major issues that we've had to deal with other than oil. We won't bring that piece up again, but the oil did on the differential that the district had to go out and purchase oil from another vendor. Cost the district about $1,400 to do that. So we're hoping to get back on track with our contractual vendor to bring that issue under. So the district, as you can see, is in a pretty good shape. Again, relative to utilities, we'll hold out comment on that until the heating season is over as well.
The only thing I noticed that was kind of interesting was the expense rate for the substitute salaries. We've only spent 7% of the budget. Is that because it's lagging behind, or we just haven't had substitutes?
That's on the way the substitutes are budgeted is that it's kind of gets placed at district-wide, and then it gets allocated down to the 3 schools.
Okay.
So we'll be doing that. There's an administrators meeting tomorrow. I'm going to ask to meet with each of the administrators individually, because actually the actual cost for substitutes is running a little bit higher than anticipated this time of year. Yeah. So you should see that in your next financial report, and I'm wrestling a little bit with trying to develop kind of an executive financial report for you folks, so you can see a 1-page snapshot, if you will, of the health and well-being of the district relative to all 3 funds, as well as any anticipations that we got, and then provide you obviously with the backup on all the detail.
One thing that stuck out is I see a lot of negatives on health insurance. And the Budget Committee took a reduction combined out of
Right.
that and the salaries, which.
Right. We did I completed, as part of the 6-month review, is to take a look at, obviously, the biggest expenditure for the district is in salaries and benefits. And as I've reported to the superintendent, that is running very tight this year. There's been a number of new hires, and that becomes problematic if those new hires elect a higher health insurance plan that wasn't in the budget. It's a substantial swing from, for instance, a single to a family employer cost of that. We had a number of those occurrences that took place. And I also think LGC is doing a better job, if you will, over the past couple of years of giving us a guaranteed maximum rate, and then the actual backs into it are very close to that, so.
Which they said doesn't happen.
The days of the, gaining some margin there between the GMR and the actual, I think are slipping, especially with the recent lawsuit there.
Well,
so.
I mean, I remember years where the GMR was 13% or 15%, and then it would come in at
5.
well, 7 or 8
7
or
or
10,
8,
but
right.
even, 5% on a
Right.
$1.5 million budget's is
Right. Yeah, the
not an
district-
insignificant amount of money, so.
Right.
One of the issues that we've talked about in regard to that is that the actual percentage increase in total national spending on healthcare, the 1-year and 3-year average are both 3.7%, which are at almost historic lows. Public service
Just wait.
healthcare, public service healthcare, even if it doesn't change, is going to be more attractive compared to what's happening on
Oh, yeah.
the other side. So the next couple of years is gonna have, our concern is we're gonna have more volatility, not less.
And I think it's gonna be an influx.
Yes.
Not a outflux,
Yes.
or
Reading an
whatever the
article
word is.
on
Well, we
healthcare.
expect that it'll be volatile, there'll be more change than normal, and unfortunately, most of that will be inflow of people rather than outflow.
Right.
And we think that that'll be exacerbated if we're not on the new contract.
Well, I think the key is, pending any further delays, the employer mandate kicks in. I think it's effective in August of this year. Any plan that renews after August,
Right.
you have to cover certain services, which you're gonna find non-public employers using creative methods to control their costs there.
That
I was
three-
reading,
that's-
over 70 million people who are covered under health care plans could be receiving letters in September, October, informing them that they no longer have health care because of,
Yeah.
they're not gonna be able to
Employer
pay, they're gonna be basically looking for $20,000 health care plans. They're just, I tell them to get on the website to Healthcare USA and federal government and see what works out, but
I mean, my company bit the bullet this year and went to a high deductible plan.
I just-
First $6,000,
it's yours.
in addition to my premium, is mine, and
What I wanted to point out with that 3.7% is that that's all healthcare spending, not the average rate of increase of healthcare plans, because some of that, a good chunk of that is dictated by Medicaid and Medicare, and those prices have been controlled by government. So the more thorough analysis was, the overall spending is at 3.7% increase. That's not been borne evenly by the population.
no. The other interesting healthcare side that I read this week was preventative care is supposed to be covered as part of the new law. So like
Physical.
mammograms and physicals and colonoscopies, people are getting bills for colonoscopies. The procedure's covered, but the anesthesiologist isn't. The recovery room is not, the prep is not, so they're getting a $1,500, $2,000 bill, and when they go to the insurance company says, no, we cover the cost of the procedure as we're required by law, right here. We paid the $3,500 or whatever that is. This other stuff, it's related care to the procedure that's not required to be covered, so you're gonna see.
I'm not sure one of the procedures, that's one of the procedures where the
Being awake for it.
anesthetic is optional.
Well, so, I mean, that was my thought was, I guess you don't have to have anesthesia, then you don't need recovery, and you don't need the pre-op, but it ain't gonna be very comfortable. But that's, I think what you'll see with plans, and people are gonna transition to the plan naturally that's the best for them, and while the new contract addresses some of that, I don't know that it's.
It doesn't fully address it.
Exactly. So I suspect Dr. Cochran's right, there'll be some volatility, probably not in the positive sense for the district next year. And we do open enrollment in September? September, October,
July
something like
1st.
that? The open enrollment? I thought,
It's that, the
Effective
process
July
begins
1st.
in May, it's effective July 1.
oh, okay.
That's part of the budgetary development process,
Yeah.
wildcat, that really hurts districts. You don't know.
Yeah.
Technology report, any questions on the technology report? No?
Server went down, that must have been exciting. Good thing it snowed those days, huh?
I'm sorry, it was,
Said the server went down on the 2nd. It's a good thing it was snowing that day. Didn't seem to impact anybody.
I didn't know that they were responsive now, though. Is that true? I don't know why. They're saying all the district websites are responsive for tablets. Oh, a little bit. It's got a menu. That's good. That was one of my biggest pet peeves, actually, is I'd go to the district website on my iPad, and the menu didn't work, so you couldn't get to the. I was always going there to get, like, it was like 7:30 in the morning. Actually, it was probably like 7:50. The bus coming in 2 minutes. The kids want to know what's for lunch that day, and the menus don't work on an iPad. It's like, ah.
That little apple symbol, that's the sign of your problem.
I'm sure they wouldn't.
Non-supported technology.
They wouldn't work
An
on any
apple for
tablet.
lunch.
Yeah, they wouldn't work on any tablet because they're hover menus, and you can't hover with a tablet. There's no hover motion.
Yours on the Galaxy S4,
No, there isn't.
not on an iPhone.
I just save it on my laptop and I pull up every morning
Yeah.
and remind them.
That's good. Yeah, once you get to, like, the third or fourth day of the month, but the first day of the month, like, okay. Default budget.
See, it's right there.
You have,
Yes, it is.
in your packet, just launched copy of the DRA online form that will allow us to remit to the Department of Revenue Administration a number of forms, this being one, is the default budget. And so this is completed. It aligns with your vote of, I believe your last meeting, you voted to approve the default budget. This is the form that aligns with that. All the necessary adjustments, bringing the default budget to $20,804,559.
Oh,
6 copies in here to sign. The last page is the signature page, I believe.
I gotta make sure I sign in the right place.
Well, they don't, we just, the forms,
Oh, I gotta write my title too?
you gotta write your title so that you can be as creative as you wish.
He's creative as you wish.
I'll leave the top one for Derek.
Okay, well, that's going around. We have the warrant articles.
Again, the warrant articles will need to be voted on by the board. A couple have been voted on, and we have tallies associated with that. But again, you heard this evening, warrant number 2, which is the LEA contract, at the direction of DRA, was the motion to recommend that warrant article failed because of a 4-4 vote from the Budget Committee, so we'll list that accordingly.
so the language, Frank, is it not recommended?
It is not recommended.
I'll make a motion to accept Article 3 as written.
Second. So we're going to accept it or recommend it right now?
Recommended.
You need to recommend, yep.
Any discussion? Mr. Miller, do you have an opinion on Article 3?
As I stated before, I don't think we know that we need this position, and once we create this position, it's difficult to get rid of a position, so I'm not going to support this. I don't think we've done, I know Dr. Cochran gave us the presentation on what was required to take the test, but I don't know that we have the data as to how taking the test, the impact of the computerization of the test will be on the district at this point, and I guess I'd like to see the rationale and some real data before I support it, so.
I will caution the board, for the sake of time, this, a vote tonight of deleting will impact the MS 27, which means it's gonna.
Well,
need-
anybody else is gonna vote. Said I wasn't gonna
No.
support it. And
I'm just cautioning.
Well,
You're
why can't
running
it
out
go
of
as
time.
not, why can't it go as not recommended by the board by a 2-2 vote?
it can.
But it will change the MS 27,
Why?
because it has to go under either a recommended or not recommended
But it's
column.
recommended based on the budget committee vote,
Right.
not our vote, right?
But you have a column, school, district,
Oh,
school
well.
board, budget committee. You have 2 days to get these posted. So we will need to notify, I'm just bringing it out, I'm not telling you, I'm not trying to sway which way you do, Mr. Miller, I'm just bringing this out.
You won't, Mr. Markowitz, you won't.
I don't intend to, but I'm just telling you, it runs the risk of us needing to notify the budget committee tomorrow morning that they are not to stop by until we modify the form.
Or it could be fun to let them stop by and tell them to come back later.
While I appreciate your concern, I suspect it won't be a problem, but we don't know till we vote.
Any more discussion?
While I understand what Dennis is saying, at the same time, I do believe that there is going to be an issue at the elementary school, and I think what getting this approved and appropriated allows us to begin the process of understanding exactly what the problem is. And I don't know if there's a way to do it without having somebody whose specific responsibility is to answer your questions, because I don't think there's anybody there now that can do that. And so it would always, the answer is always going to be, well, where's the problem? Well, we have a problem, we're trying to find somebody to go in and tell us exactly what the situation is, and we don't have that person, because it's not like we can pull some people from other schools and say, hey, we need you to go down there and do this part-time. So, and at the same time, I think that the voters understand technology, and we just talked about a plan, and, you know, again, I think that everything begins at an early age, and I think if we can fix a lot of problems with students coming out of GMS and stuff like that, or enhance their learning and their abilities, that as they move into middle school and high school, we'll be better off as a district, and our students will be better served.
So do we not have a problem with this at the middle school for fifth graders?
We do. My son took computer with fifth grade last year with Robin Corbell, so he learned a lot in computer class.
But are they gonna dedicate half of that semester to the test? Because we're implying we need a half-time teacher.
For a full year, for what?
But I'm just
2
asking,
grades.
how are we solving the problem that's gonna exist at the middle school? Because you're saying there's gonna be a problem. And I'm not
Well, we
trying
are
to
solving
argue,
it.
I'm just
Well,
trying to say, we've got
The
issues.
fifth graders are taking computer classes.
So, the curriculum is set for that class. And from what Dr. Cochran explained, what the test requires you to do probably is not what's being taught in the fifth grade computer class. And if it's not, are we gonna alter that curriculum for half the year to teach what those students need to know for the test? And what about the
Well,
sixth
that's what
graders
they
and
need to
seventh
know, how
graders
to
and eighth
operate the
graders?
computer system so that they're able to take the tests. That's what this position
Because-
is for.
I don't think it's just for the test. I think it's also to teach
the-
computer skills, which they're lacking right now.
But the test is pretty specific. It asks you
You
to
don't have
do
to take the
things
test
that
on-
aren't the normal things you would do interacting with a software program necessarily.
But we also
Well
don't,
taken, it should be. We should be doing the sorts of things in regular instruction.
Just saying, if there's
Here
a
the
problem 1 to 4, there's a problem 6 through 8. Probably not in 11th grade, but
Maybe we could solve it all with an iPhone.
I doubt it.
In the middle
You
school,
wouldn't be
yeah.
able to cut and
Middle
paste, John. So,
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
aye.
Motion carried. The warrant article is recommended by the school board 3-1. What's the next one?
We'll make a motion to approve Article 4.
Second.
Any discussion on this one? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The article is recommended by the school board 4-0. Article 5.
Make a motion to approve Article 5.
Second.
Any discussion?
While I think this might be a source of discussion at deliberative, and
That's what Trish is talking about.
point taken. I do worry about no means no with this one. That we can't do something,
Should we need to?
yes. So just picture one of the outside things dies at the high school. Somebody would argue you can't fix it because you're gonna upgrade that with a new piece of equipment. Just devil's advocate.
Yeah. If this was added to the budget at deliberative, could we remove the warrant article?
You could zero it, but if it
Still
fails,
fails,
you're
though.
still in the same boat. I mean, that's my only reservation when you put this kind of stuff. At the risk of angering people.
Well, you know,
I think this is something you probably could do out of end-of-year funds, if we have some. And I don't know that after we talked about adding it, I don't know that you want to put a safety and a security item
Yes, the warrant
out
article.
where your hands are going to be tied by the law
For a year.
for a year, that you can't do something.
I think the citizens are hopefully realize the importance of security equipment.
I would hope so too, but I think there's some percentage of the population that's gonna vote no because it spends money. I don't know if it's 5%, 10%, 40%. It just, the no means no, while I think it was a very well-intentioned law, has, year-long ramifications should the voters decide not to support something. And that's okay if we go forward with our eyes open, knowing there may be some issues.
Some of the other districts, I mean, I've tried to keep a pretty sharp eye on it, Londonderry and Nashua and things like that. They've all done theirs as warrant articles, their security upgrades as warrant articles. Some of them are much more substantial than $36,000, and $36,000 is a substantial amount. But I think Londonderry is spending a couple $100,000 in their
The warrant
upgrade.
article said $1
Did they change it?
after it was approved. They just put $1 in the budget item. There you go.
And they did the work.
Yeah, so,
I just, kind of want, we had the discussion about the road article with the town. They've got names of the roads
Oh.
inside the warrant article, and I raised the issue that if that fails, they can't do work on that. And they said, well, we won't have the work. And Frank Byron got to the point that I was trying to get to quicker, saying, if a culvert fails, they can't fix it,
Yeah.
because it's listed in the warrant article, and the warrant article fails.
Seems like it's just a bad idea anyway, because everyone's gonna look at it and go, that's not my road, vote against it.
Well, they say people don't know the roads, they'll vote against it, but I happen to side with Derek that,
oh, you need a blue pen, sir.
This is blue.
Okay.
that,
I didn't know that though. Good.
I mean, Cutler would probably make it, because I think everybody in town probably drives it
Cutler, yeah.
once a week minimum, but.
Everyone that would have voted no was on Cutler anyway, so now they're gonna vote yes. So it's
Yeah, that's true. Man, Trish, if she was here, she'd give you a look.
I'm glad you went there, Derek, and not me. So, I just want to make sure that we understand as a board that if for some reason the public decides not to support that,
Well, we could always yank it tonight.
much to Frank's.
chagrin. Well, you got to update it anyway by putting the vote in, right? Or are you doing that now as we're
No,
talking?
I'm doing the
There
vote.
was a real-
No, I have to update the MS-27.
At the group, it was a real toss-up. We had three priorities, which were lifted from the original impact fee proposal that we didn't move forward. And there was a real toss-up about whether or not the communication systems were the higher priority. And very close vote. As it was, people felt rushed about the communication systems. I think overall, it was probably 60/40 communication systems, but we really didn't know exactly what we wanted.
Yep.
And so the thing was the argument was made, and I think it was by Cindy Couture, who made it very well. Given that we all agree what we need to secure the exterior of the building, and we really haven't researched the other pieces well, I recommend that while it's probably 60/40 of the committee who would prefer this as the other priority. So if this warrant article failed, it would give us the time to
do that.
research and know what the other
Okay.
is.
That's
That'd be
And
my
if this one
rationale.
passes, then we still have money left over at the end of the year, maybe use that for the communication systems.
Well, that would only be part of it,
Yeah.
because it's pretty expensive.
Oh, really? Okay. I guess, I went back and forth on this, but I guess my opinion now is just to go forward with this one. And if something did, I can't imagine a lawyer would ever tell us that we can't fix, secure access, because I guess if no means no. I mean, it's so,
Don't know.
Well, this would mean you can't upgrade.
You can upgrade it. You can always fix
equipment.
it.
You can repair.
You can repair.
Right.
And in that repair, if that means that
If the older
X is no
model is
longer
not
available,
available,
you have to buy the
go-
next.
That's right,
Whatever is available.
that's right.
And that's not gonna be looked upon as an upgrade. It's looked upon as that
The
you're
upgrade would
repairing
have to be
something.
materially substantial. If you're fixing. I'm not a
Then
lawyer.
again,
I'm not a lawyer.
$200.
But we-
Purchase
Very
security
Trust me, we heard a
equipment
lot about
necessary
Litchfield.
to upgrade.
Litchfield
That's
isn't,
pretty
is pretty well known around the state. For the
Yeah.
no means no. That, we had a similar situation, and the opinion of a lawyer that you folks are well aware of was that it has to be a material change of upgrade. If you're going to repair something that's already in place, and that older model is not available, then you go to the next reasonable. It has to be reasonable. If you're going from a
Okay.
as a car analogy, from a Chevy to a Mercedes. you know.
Okay.
I think it's good. I'm glad to hear.
I-
I can change it in the stroke of a couple of keypads, but not a problem. Age technology, we can do it.
Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Articles recommended 400.
Do we need to sign this tonight?
I can print it off and have you sign it so you don't have to come in tomorrow. That'd be
Because
great.
I can't come in tomorrow,
So
so.
we're gonna have you sign it.
If you can get 3, it's official, but
got
Acceptance of
4.
wellness grant?
Did, if I may,
Oh,
was.
yes, sorry.
I just want to make sure that everything, did you want to revote Article 1 where the number changed? Well, when you did vote Article 1, it didn't have the 42,000 or 43,000 in there, that the Budget Committee, as you know,
oh, that's right.
changed their vote. So Article 1 now is, the Budget Committee is an 800 vote, whereas before it was 710.
Actually, I don't think we voted that because of that.
I don't have a vote.
I'll make a motion to support Article 1, or approve Article 1.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Oh. Thought it was
I
pretty
think do we want to support that budget?
Well, I just made the you gotta have the motion to support it to
understand
get
that.
started.
But my question is they have made reductions. Are they reductions we can live with? But it's not
Still
like,
higher than the default. Yeah.
it's still,
So I thought about that after the Budget Committee meeting and over the weekend, and so part of me says, no, it wasn't what we recommended, so we shouldn't support it. But then the other side says, well, if I vote no, am I really saying
Yeah.
I support the default budget? Which I don't think is the case, but I think that's how it's often interpreted.
to interpret.
And if the school board voted 0-4-0, people would say, why should we
Yeah.
Correct.
support it?
Or even 2-2. That was all.
You had a hypothetical, that was it?
That was it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 4-0.
John, you want to revote Article 2,
I was
since the
gonna say,
Budget Committee did?
we could revote Article 2 too, but that would be wrong.
Well, I know, I believe that,
If we do, it look better.
Well-
0.
I think that wouldn't be fair to Troy.
No, I just,
So, yeah.
Thank you.
are we good? Yeah, you need to pull Article 2.
I'm gonna print it before, wait, I'm gonna go print, it's going to
Oh, I
print.
can just imagine that.
As
I
Mr.
can
York
see
would
that.
say, right? It's going to print.
I can
No
see
change.
the
Don't kill any more
unfair labor
trees.
practice coming a mile away.
She may make a recommendation on Article 5 that we may not like in her presentation. No, she's not gonna get up in front of the,
No,
people,
no,
though.
be frank.
She's not. It's not her, that's not her, I'll be frank doing that one.
We have a grant to accept.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second John's motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 3-0-0.
If everybody walks out of the room, we take a vote.
Any questions on the manifest?
You know about that. I had no questions on the manifest.
And that brings up public input.
Public input's done.
All right, with that, we'll enter non-public session under RSA 91A 311 for the aid, the dismissal, promotion, or compensation of any public employee or the disciplining of such employee or the investigation of any charges against him unless the employee affected, 1, has a right to a meeting, and 2, requests the meeting be open, in which case request shall be granted. B, the hiring of any person as a public employee. C, matters which, if discussed in public, would likely affect adversely the reputation of any person other than a member of the body or agency itself unless such person requests an open meeting.
So made.
Yeah, go on.
Second?
Second.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. Got 3.
No,
I think John did.
Oh, did they?
3 yeses and 1 why not.